So apparently Delhi has become very cold again, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Today it's good. Last 2 days it was very, very cold. Today it's not bad actually. How's the situation in Madrid now, Suman? Is it improving? Can you go out? Huh?
Cases are rising very badly.
Oh, okay.
So even in April, it was only 25,000 cases a day. Now it's
Yeah.
almost 80,000.
Almost?
80,000.
Oh my God.
Good morning, Suman. Good afternoon, Deepak, Nimit.
Morning, sir.
Good afternoon, Dr. Venu. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. So we're going to just about to start. Thank you so much for joining in at the right time.
You're almost
One of
looking
our
like a politician.
presenters had to send in a tape message because it was at the dead of the night in the US. So Priya has sent a message. Do I look sufficiently conference-like, Suman?
Thank you. Just
No, you look like you've moved over to the political class. Kerala towel behind you and the.
Okay, so let's hand it over to the control room so that they can start the proceedings.
Requesting control room to start the timer. Namaskar. A very warm good afternoon to all the dignitaries and participants present here. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all the ladies and gentlemen to the second day of the International Conference and Consultation Kerala Looks Ahead, organized by Kerala State Planning Board. The conference is designed to serve as a platform for the government of Kerala to learn from the experiences and best practices across the world in its efforts to modernize the economy and bring the benefits of high growth and inclusive development to all the people of Kerala. The conference will discuss the future prospects for Kerala in key areas. The sessions are planned in 9 key areas, and tourism is one of them. With immense pleasure, on behalf of Kerala State Planning Board, we would like to welcome each one of you to the session on tourism. Before we begin the session, for the smooth flow of the virtual session, all are requested to note the following. All are requested to remain muted throughout the session. The speakers who have a presentation to display or share the presentation, kindly ensure that you have your presentation file open and ready, and there are no other programs running on documents open on your desktop. In case you need any assistance, please let us know. All are requested to keep your mobile phones and other devices in the silent mode. It is recommended to use a headset as it can improve sound quality. Kindly make use of the chat facility to put forward your ideas or questions to the panelists. Now, for beginning the session, I would like to welcome Dr. Venu V, Member Secretary, Kerala State Planning Board, for the welcome address. So please.
ശരിയായി Right. Good afternoon to all the distinguished delegates in the conference room, to all the presenters and speakers from across the world, and to all those in the industry and interested in the tourism industry who are watching this program through one of our social media channels. It is an honor and a privilege to be chairing this very important session, which is part of an extremely significant event that the State Planning Board of the Government of Kerala is organizing over 3 days. As mentioned by Varun, the conference spans across several key sectors of the state, and all of you would agree with me that tourism is one of the most important ones. We are very pleased and humble that the important speakers that we had identified have all agreed to participate in this. So first of all, on behalf of the Government of Kerala and the Planning Board, may I extend our greetings and thanks to all the speakers and welcome them to this session. I just have a couple of points to make before I leave the floor to the speakers. As all of us know that the Kerala brand is well known. We have been recording consistent growth. We have a palette of diverse products, and we are characterized, our tourism industry is characterized by the preponderance of local enterprises. We know also that tourism in Kerala, certainly as part of tourism in India and across the world, is facing perhaps the biggest challenge the industry has ever faced over the last 100 years. Multiple problems have struck the state. We are also part of a global ecosystem which is now reeling under the pandemic. As most of us know, Kerala was beset with some extremely unfortunate natural disasters in 2018 and 2019. But even in 2019, despite having a repeat of floods and landslides in some parts of the state had started to record healthy arrival rates. But 2020 has put all of us back by several decades. We know that it's a very tough time that we are dealing with. Several enterprises have closed. Thousands have been rendered jobless. So it is in this grim scenario that we dare to talk about the future of tourism in Kerala. Why do we say this? Because I believe that there is always going to be an end to the pandemic. And when it ends, it is the time of opportunity. But then Kerala needs to look ahead. The theme of our conference is Kerala looks ahead. So what are the things, what are the areas, what are the aspects that we have to look ahead for in the tourism industry? This is what over the next 2.5 hours we hope to discuss, and we hope to be benefited by the views of the expert panelists here who are bringing in international expertise, international knowledge and wisdom, and we hope to be educated and we hope to get the right guidance from these speakers. After the speakers have completed their presentations, we would love to have a discussion. As the anchor mentioned, kindly put your views into the chat box. We are curating that, and we will request the speakers to respond to questions and suggestions. We also hope to have two or three speakers come up live on video as well. We will do that as we go on. The last point I wanted to make is this. The session hopes to look at the changing trends in national and international tourism. We have invested quite a bit in responsible tourism. What is its future? Where does responsible tourism fit in the overall ambit of sustainable tourism? What kind of segmentation should we look at? In arrivals, should we look at a broad palette or should we look at niche? There are several questions that will inform this discussion. What kind of skills will be needed for tourism of tomorrow? These are the questions that I've asked myself while thinking about this session. I hope that the speakers will touch upon these important aspects. With these short words, I would like to welcome all of you once again to the session, and let's hope that we have a very stimulating couple of hours ahead of us. To kickstart the proceedings, I would now like to invite our Minister for Corporation, Tourism and Devisms, Government of Kerala, Mr. Kadagampalli Surendran, to offer his remarks.
ഗ്രഹീതമാണ് നാം ഈ നാട്. കേരള ടൂറിസം സംരംഭകർ, തദ്ദേശവാസികൾ എന്നിവരുടെ കാലങ്ങളായ പ്രയത്നവും പങ്കാളിത്തമാണ് ഇന്നത്തെ ഈ അഭൂതമായ വളർച്ചയുടെ പ്രധാന കാരണം. കേരളം നേടിയെടുത്ത ഈ വളർച്ച ഇന്ന് ഇന്ത്യയിലെ മറ്റു സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങൾക്ക് ഒരു മാതൃകയായി മാറിക്കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. നമ്മുടെ സംസ്ഥാനത്തിൻ്റെ മൊത്ത വരുമാനത്തിൻ്റെ 10% ഇന്ന് വിനോദസഞ്ചാര മേഖലയുടെ സംഭാവനയാണ്. സാമ്പത്തിക സുസ്ഥിരതയ്ക്കും സാമൂഹിക ഉന്നതിക്കും വഴിതരുന്ന ടൂറിസം ഇന്ന് കേരളത്തിലെ ഏറ്റവും ലാഭകരമായ നിക്ഷേപങ്ങളൊന്നായി മാറിക്കഴിഞ്ഞു. ലക്ഷത്തോളം ആൾക്കാർ ടൂറിസം മേഖല കഴിഞ്ഞ വർഷം കേരള ലുക്ക് അഹെഡ് എന്ന പേരിൽ സംഘടിപ്പിക്കുന്ന ഈ അന്താരാഷ്ട്ര കോൺഫറൻസിൽ സംബന്ധിക്കുന്ന എല്ലാവർക്കും എൻ്റെ വിനീതമായിട്ട് നമസ്കാരം. കേരളം ഇന്ന് ആഗോള വിനോദസഞ്ചാര ഭൂപടത്തിലെ ഒഴിച്ചുകൂടാനാവാത്ത സാന്നിധ്യമായി മാറിക്കഴിഞ്ഞിരിക്കുന്നു. ദൈവത്തിൻ്റെ സ്വന്തം നാടെന്ന പേരിനെ അന്വർത്ഥമാകും വിധം പ്രകൃതി വിഭവങ്ങളാലും തനിമയാർന്ന സംസ്കാര സമ്പന്നതയാലും അനുഗ്രഹീതമാണ് നമ്മുടെ ഈ നാട്. കേരള ടൂറിസം സംരംഭകർ, തദ്ദേശവാസികൾ എന്നിവരുടെ കാലങ്ങളായുള്ള കഠിന പ്രയത്നവും പങ്കാളിത്തവുമാണ് ഇന്നത്തെ ഈ അഭൂതപൂർവമായ വളർച്ചയുടെ പ്രധാന കാരണം. കേരളം നേടിയെടുത്ത ഈ വളർച്ച ഇന്ന് ഇന്ത്യയിലെ മറ്റു സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങൾക്ക് ഒരു മാതൃകയായി മാറിക്കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. നമ്മുടെ സംസ്ഥാനത്തിൻ്റെ മൊത്ത വരുമാനത്തിൻ്റെ 10% ഇന്ന് വിനോദസഞ്ചാര മേഖലയുടെ സംഭാവനയാണ്. സാമ്പത്തിക സുസ്ഥിരതയ്ക്കും സാമൂഹിക ഉന്നതിക്കും വഴിതെളിക്കുന്ന ടൂറിസം ഇന്ന് കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ ഏറ്റവും ലാഭകരമായ നിക്ഷേപങ്ങളിലൊന്നായി മാറിക്കഴിഞ്ഞിരിക്കുന്നു. ഏകദേശം 15 ലക്ഷത്തോളം ആൾക്കാരാണ് ഇന്ന് ടൂറിസം മേഖലയിൽ ജോലി ചെയ്യുന്നത്. കഴിഞ്ഞ വർഷം 45,000 കോടി രൂപയാണ് ടൂറിസം മേഖലയിൽ നിന്നുള്ള മൊത്ത വരുമാനം. ഇത് സർവകാല റെക്കോർഡാണ്. സഞ്ചാരികളുടെ വരവിൻ്റെ കാര്യത്തിൽ കേരള ടൂറിസത്തിൻ്റെ ഉജ്ജ്വലമായ വളർച്ചയാണ് 2019 കണ്ടത്. 24 വർഷങ്ങൾക്ക് ശേഷമാണ് കേരളത്തിലെ സഞ്ചാരികളുടെ വരവിൽ 17.2% വളർച്ചയുണ്ടായത്. വിദേശ സഞ്ചാരികൾ, ആഭ്യന്തര സഞ്ചാരികൾ ഇവരുടെ കാര്യത്തിൽ യഥാക്രമം 8.52%, 17.81% വർധനവുണ്ടായി. ടൂറിസത്തിൽ നിന്നുള്ള വിദേശ നാണ്യ വരുമാനം ഇതാദ്യമായി 2019 10,000 കോടി രൂപ കഴിഞ്ഞ് ആകെ 10,271 കോടി രൂപയിലെത്തി. നമ്മുടെ കൊച്ചു കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ സാമ്പത്തിക ഭദ്രത മാത്രമല്ല, ലക്ഷക്കണക്കിന് തൊഴിലവസരങ്ങൾ സൃഷ്ടിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് സുസ്ഥിരമായ സാമൂഹിക വികസനത്തിനും ടൂറിസം മേഖല നമ്മുടെ സംസ്ഥാനത്ത് നിന്ന് വഴിയൊരുക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. ദൈവത്തിൻ്റെ സ്വന്തം നാട്ടിലെ വിനോദസഞ്ചാര മേഖല ഉത്തരവാദിത്ത ടൂറിസം പോലെ കേരളം മുൻകൈയെടുത്ത് നടപ്പാക്കിയ പദ്ധതികളിലൂടെ പ്രാദേശിക ജനവിഭാഗങ്ങൾക്ക് സാധ്യതകളുടെ ഒരു പൊതുലോകം തീർക്കാൻ ടൂറിസത്തിന് സാധിച്ചു. നമ്മുടെ നാടിൻ്റെ തനതായ അനുഭവങ്ങൾ ഗ്രാമീണ അനുഭവവേദ്യ യാത്രകളിലൂടെ ലോകത്തിന് പകർന്നു നൽകാനും നമുക്ക് സാധിച്ചു. സമൂഹത്തിൻ്റെ താഴേക്കിടയിലുള്ളവർക്കും സ്ത്രീകൾക്കും ഇതുവഴി അനന്തമായ അവസരങ്ങളും സാധ്യതകളും തുറന്നു നൽകാൻ സാധിച്ചു എന്നതും എടുത്തു പറയേണ്ട ഒരു കാര്യമാണ്. വിനോദസഞ്ചാര മേഖലയുടെ ഗുണഫലങ്ങൾ എല്ലാവരിലേക്കും എത്തിക്കുക എന്നതാണ് കേരള ടൂറിസത്തിൻ്റെ ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ പ്രധാന ലക്ഷ്യങ്ങളിലൊന്ന്. ഇതനുസരിച്ച് ഈ സർക്കാർ അധികാരമേറ്റ ഉടൻ തന്നെ സമഗ്രമായ ഒരു ടൂറിസം നയം പ്രഖ്യാപിച്ചുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഈ രംഗത്തെ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾക്ക് തുടക്കം കുറിച്ചത്. നിലവിലുള്ള പ്രധാന ടൂറിസം ഉൽപ്പന്നങ്ങൾ പ്രോത്സാഹിപ്പിക്കുന്നതിന് പുറമെ സംസ്ഥാനത്ത് അഡ്വഞ്ചർ ടൂറിസം വികസനത്തിന് മുൻഗണന നൽകുക, മലബാറിൻ്റെ ടൂറിസം വികസനത്തിന് മുന്തിയ പ്രാധാന്യം നൽകുക, കൊച്ചിൻ ബിനാലെ മെച്ചപ്പെട്ട രീതിയിൽ സംഘടിപ്പിക്കുക, മുസ്ലിം സംരക്ഷണ പദ്ധതിയുടെ മാതൃകയിൽ കൂടുതൽ പൈതൃക സംരക്ഷണ പദ്ധതികൾ ആവിഷ്കരിക്കുക, ഇവയൊക്കെയാണ് ഈ സർക്കാർ ടൂറിസം വികസനത്തിന് മുൻഗണന നൽകിയ മറ്റു മേഖലകൾ. കണ്ണൂർ വിമാനത്താവളം പ്രവർത്തിച്ചു തുടങ്ങിയതോടുകൂടി ഉത്തര മലബാറിൻ്റെ ടൂറിസം പ്രാധാന്യം വർദ്ധിച്ചത് പരിഗണിച്ച് നിരവധിയായ പദ്ധതികളാണ് ഈ സർക്കാർ മലബാറിൽ അനുവദിച്ചത്. കണ്ണൂർ, കാസർഗോഡ് ജില്ലകളിലായി ഒഴുകുന്ന 8 നദികളെ കോർത്തിണക്കി ആവിഷ്കരിച്ച റിവർ ക്രൂയിസ് ടൂറിസം പദ്ധതി, മുഴുപ്പിലങ്ങാട് ധർമ്മടം ബീച്ചുകളെ ലോകോത്തര നിലവാരത്തിൽ വികസിപ്പിക്കുന്ന ബീച്ച് ടൂറിസം പദ്ധതി എന്നിവയൊക്കെ ഈ സർക്കാർ അനുവദിച്ച മലബാറിലെ പ്രധാന ടൂറിസം പദ്ധതികളാണ്. നമ്മുടെ നാടിൻ്റെ പൈതൃക പാരമ്പര്യം പരിഗണിച്ച് നിരവധി പദ്ധതികൾ ഈ രംഗത്ത് സർക്കാർ നടപ്പാക്കി വരുന്നു. ഇത് പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട മുസ്ലിം പൈതൃക പദ്ധതിയുടെ മാതൃകയിൽ തലശ്ശേരിയിലും ആലപ്പുഴയിലും ആവിഷ്കരിച്ച 2 പൈതൃക സംരക്ഷണ പദ്ധതികളും അതിവേഗം പണി പൂർത്തിയായി വരുന്നു. ഇവയെല്ലാം പൂർത്തിയാകുമ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ നാടിൻ്റെ പൈതൃക സ്വത്ത് സംരക്ഷിച്ച് ഭാവി തലമുറയ്ക്ക് വേണ്ടി സൂക്ഷിക്കാനും അതോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ നാടിൻ്റെ ടൂറിസം വികസനത്തിന് ഉപകരിക്കാനും കഴിയുന്ന രീതിയിലാണ് നടപ്പിലാക്കി വരുന്നത്. നമ്മുടെ നാടിൻ്റെ വ്യാപാര പാരമ്പര്യത്തിന് തെളിവായി ഇന്നും അവശേഷിക്കുന്ന പൗരാണിക കച്ചവട കേന്ദ്രമാണ് തിരുവനന്തപുരത്തെ ചാലയും കോഴിക്കോട് മിഠായി തെരുവും. 2 പൈതൃക തെരുവുകളും സംരക്ഷിച്ച് നിലനിർത്താൻ പദ്ധതികൾ നടപ്പാക്കി വരുന്നു. സാഹസിക വിനോദസഞ്ചാരത്തിന് നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടിലെ സാധ്യത പരിഗണിച്ച് ഈ രംഗത്ത് പ്രവർത്തിക്കുന്ന ഏജൻസികൾക്ക് അംഗീകാരം നൽകുന്നുള്ള പദ്ധതി ഇന്ത്യയിൽ ആദ്യമായി നമ്മുടെ സംസ്ഥാനത്താണ് നടപ്പാക്കിയത്. അതോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ അഡ്വഞ്ചർ ടൂറിസം രംഗത്തെ പ്രൊഫഷണലുകളെ വാർത്തെടുക്കുന്നതിനുള്ള അഡ്വഞ്ചർ ടൂറിസം അക്കാദമി തിരുവനന്തപുരത്ത് സ്ഥാപിക്കാനുള്ള നടപടികൾ അന്തിമഘട്ടത്തിലാണ്. വേൾഡ് ടൂറിസം ഓർഗനൈസേഷൻ്റെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട മുദ്രാവാക്യമാണ് ടൂറിസം എല്ലാവർക്കും എന്നത്. ഇതനുസരിച്ച് ടൂറിസം കേന്ദ്രത്തിൽ പ്രായമായവർ, ഭിന്നശേഷിക്കാർ, ഗർഭിണികൾ തുടങ്ങിയവർക്ക് പ്രത്യേക സൗകര്യം ഏർപ്പെടുത്തുന്നതിനായി കേരളത്തിലെ ഭൂരിപക്ഷം ടൂറിസം കേന്ദ്രങ്ങളും ഭിന്നശേഷി സൗഹൃദമാക്കുന്നുള്ള പദ്ധതി സർക്കാർ നടപ്പാക്കി വരും. കേരളത്തിലെ ആദ്യത്തെ പൊതു സ്വകാര്യ പങ്കാളിത്തത്തോടെ നടപ്പാക്കിയ ജടായുപ്പാറ ടൂറിസം പദ്ധതി ഇന്ന് ഇന്ത്യയിലെ ഏതൊരു സംസ്ഥാനത്തിനും മാതൃകയാണ്. ശ്രീ പത്മനാഭസ്വാമി ക്ഷേത്രത്തിലെ നിധിശേഖരത്തെക്കുറിച്ചുള്ള വാർത്ത പുറം ലോകം അറിഞ്ഞതോടെ തീർത്ഥാടനം ലക്ഷ്യമിട്ട് കേരളത്തിലേക്ക് എത്തുന്ന ആൾക്കാരുടെ എണ്ണം വളരെ കൂടുതലാണ്. ഇത് പരിഗണിച്ച് തീർത്ഥാടകർക്ക് ആവശ്യമായ അടിസ്ഥാന സൗകര്യം ഏർപ്പെടുത്തുന്ന പദ്ധതി ശ്രീ പത്മനാഭസ്വാമി ക്ഷേത്രം, ശബരിമല, ഗുരുവായൂർ എന്നീ ആരാധനാലയങ്ങൾ നടപ്പിലാക്കി വരുന്നു. ഇതുകൂടാതെ തത്വമസി എന്നുള്ള പേരിൽ നമ്മുടെ സംസ്ഥാനത്തെ തീർത്ഥാടകരെ അവർക്ക് ആവശ്യമായിട്ടുള്ള സൗകര്യം ഒരുക്കുന്നതിനുള്ള വിവിധ പദ്ധതികൾ വിവിധ ദേവാലയങ്ങൾ കേന്ദ്രീകരിച്ച് സംസ്ഥാനത്തുടനീളം നടക്കുകയാണ്. ഉത്തരവാദിത്ത ടൂറിസത്തിലൂടെ അഭ്യസ്തവിദ്യരായ യുവാക്കൾക്ക് മാത്രമല്ല, സാധാരണ കർഷകർക്കും തൊഴിലാളികൾക്കും വീട്ടമ്മമാർക്കുമെല്ലാം വരുമാനം നേടാനാകും. പ്രത്യക്ഷമായിട്ട് മാത്രമല്ല, പരോക്ഷമായും വലിയ തോതിൽ തൊഴിലവസരങ്ങൾ ഒരുക്കാൻ ഇതിലൂടെ കഴിയുന്നുണ്ട്. അതിവേഗം തൊഴിലുറപ്പ് നൽകാവുന്ന നിരവധി സാധ്യതകളാണ് ടൂറിസം മേഖലയുടെ വികസനത്തിലൂടെ സാധ്യമാക്കാനാകുന്നത്. വിനോദസഞ്ചാര മേഖലകളിൽ ജീവിക്കുന്നവർക്ക്, അതായത് തദ്ദേശവാസികൾ കൂടി പ്രയോജനപ്പെടുന്നതാകണം ടൂറിസം എന്ന നമ്മുടെ സംസ്ഥാന ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിൻ്റെ നയമാണ് ഉത്തരവാദിത്ത ടൂറിസം പദ്ധതികളിലൂടെ യാഥാർത്ഥ്യമാകുന്നത്. നിപ വൈറസ് ഭീഷണി, 2017 പ്രളയം എന്നിവയ്ക്ക് ശേഷം കേരള ടൂറിസം 2019 തിരിച്ചുവരവിൻ്റെ പാതയിലായിരുന്നു. പ്രകൃതി ദുരന്തങ്ങളെ തുടർന്നുള്ള പ്രതിസന്ധി ഘട്ടത്തിന് ശേഷം കേരളത്തിലേക്കുള്ള വിനോദസഞ്ചാരികളുടെ വരവ് കൂട്ടുന്നതിനായി ടൂറിസം വകുപ്പ് ബ്രാൻഡിങ്ങിലും വിപണനത്തിലും തന്ത്രപരമായ പദ്ധതികൾ ആവിഷ്കരിച്ച് നടപ്പിലാക്കി. റിസോർട്ടുകളും ടൂർ ഓപ്പറേറ്റർമാരും ഓൺലൈനിലും ഓഫ്ലൈനിലും മികച്ച പാക്കേജുകളും ഓഫറുകളുമായി സഞ്ചാരികളെ ആകർഷിക്കാൻ മുന്നോട്ട് വന്നു. ഇതിൻ്റെ COVID-19 ലോകമാകെ മാറ്റിമറിച്ചു. ഇതിൻ്റെ പ്രതിഫലനം ടൂറിസം മേഖലയിലും ഉണ്ടായി. ലോക സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥയുടെ സകല മേഖലകളെയും കോവിഡ് ബാധിച്ചു. ഇതിലേറ്റവും ഗുരുതരമായി ബാധിച്ച ഒരു മേഖല ടൂറിസമാണ്. മാർച്ച് 11 കോവിഡ്-19 ആഗോള സാംക്രമിക രോഗമായി ലോകാരോഗ്യ സംഘടന പ്രഖ്യാപിക്കുകയും ലോകമെങ്ങും യാത്രാവിലക്ക് പ്രാബല്യത്തിൽ വരികയും ചെയ്തു. എല്ലാ സാമ്പത്തിക മേഖലകളെയും സാരമായി ബാധിച്ചു തുടങ്ങിയ വൈറസ് ടൂറിസം മേഖലയിൽ 80% ചെറുകിട ഇടത്തരം സംരംഭങ്ങളായതിനാൽ ലക്ഷക്കണക്കിന് പേരുടെ ഉപജീവന മാർഗമാണ് അടഞ്ഞത്. യാത്രാ നിർദ്ദേശങ്ങളും നിയന്ത്രണങ്ങളും ആരോഗ്യ പരിശോധനകളും മുന്നറിയിപ്പും കാരണം ടൂറിസം വ്യവസായം ഇപ്പോഴും നിശ്ചലാവസ്ഥയിലാണ്. യാത്രാവിലക്കും പരിമിതമായ ഗതാഗത സൗകര്യം കാരണം ആഭ്യന്തര സഞ്ചാരികളും പൊതുവെ ഇല്ലാതായി കഴിഞ്ഞു. ചെറുകിട ടൂർ ഓപ്പറേറ്റർമാർ മുതൽ വൻകിട ഹോട്ടലുകളും റിസോർട്ടുകളും അടക്കം ഈ പ്രതിസന്ധിയുടെ പ്രത്യാഘാതത്തിലാണ്. ഈ പ്രതിസന്ധി കുറേ കാലം കൂടി തുടരാൻ സാധ്യതയുള്ളതിനാൽ ടൂറിസം മേഖലയുടെ പുനരുജ്ജീവനത്തിനായി പ്രത്യേക പദ്ധതികൾ സർക്കാർ ആവിഷ്കരിച്ച് നടപ്പിലാക്കി വരുന്നുണ്ട്. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് കേരളത്തിൽ 15 ലക്ഷം പേർ ഈ മേഖലയിൽ നിന്ന് ഉപജീവനമാർഗം കണ്ടെത്തുന്ന സാഹചര്യത്തിൽ സമൂഹത്തെ സാരമായി ബാധിക്കുന്ന തൊഴിൽ നഷ്ടം ഇല്ലാതാക്കാൻ ബിസിനസ് യൂണിറ്റുകളുടെ അതിജീവനം ഉറപ്പുവരുത്തേണ്ടതുണ്ട്. ഇത് മുന്നിൽ കണ്ട് ഈ മേഖലയിൽ ജോലി ചെയ്യുന്ന ജീവനക്കാർക്ക് ലളിത വ്യവസ്ഥകളോടുകൂടി കുറഞ്ഞ പലിശ നിരക്കിൽ വായ്പ നൽകുന്നുള്ള പദ്ധതിക്ക് രൂപം നൽകി. കൂടാതെ ഈ രംഗത്ത് മുതൽ മുടക്കിയിരിക്കുന്ന സംരംഭകർക്ക് 25 ലക്ഷം വരെ കുറഞ്ഞ പലിശ നിരക്കിൽ വായ്പ നൽകുന്നുള്ള ഒരു പദ്ധതിയും സർക്കാർ നടപ്പിലാക്കിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഇതുകൂടാതെ വൈദ്യുതി നിരക്കിൻ്റെ കാര്യത്തിലും ടൂറിസം യൂണിറ്റുകൾ LSTDയിൽ അടയ്ക്കുന്ന സ്വത്ത് നികുതിയുടെ കാര്യത്തിലുമൊക്കെ ചില ഇളവുകൾ സർക്കാർ ഈ കാലഘട്ടത്തിൽ ടൂറിസം മേഖലയ്ക്ക് ലഭ്യമാക്കിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. സാമ്പത്തിക വ്യവസ്ഥയിൽ വലിയ പങ്കുവഹിക്കുന്ന ടൂറിസം വ്യവസായത്തെ സംരക്ഷിച്ചാൽ കോവിഡാനന്തര കാലത്ത് നമുക്ക് മുന്നേറ്റം നടത്താനാകും. ആദ്യ ആഭ്യന്തര ടൂറിസമാണ് പ്രോത്സാഹിപ്പിക്കേണ്ടത്. അതിൽ തന്നെ ആദ്യം നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടുകാർ സംസ്ഥാനത്തിനകത്ത് യാത്ര ചെയ്യണം. കോവിഡിന് ശേഷം ഹെൽത്ത് ടൂറിസം മേഖലയിൽ കൂടുതൽ സാധ്യത കാണുന്നുണ്ട്. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ആയുർവേദ ചികിത്സയ്ക്കായി കേരളത്തിൽ വരുന്ന സഞ്ചാരികളുടെ എണ്ണം വർദ്ധിക്കുമെന്നാണ് കരുതുന്നത്. കോവിഡ് കാലത്തെ ടൂറിസം മാർക്കറ്റിംഗ് പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾ അടിമുടി മാറുകയാണ്. നമ്മുടെ പരമ്പരാഗത മാർക്കറ്റിംഗ് പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾക്ക് പുറമെ കോവിഡിൻ്റെ പശ്ചാത്തലത്തിൽ പ്രത്യേക മാർക്കറ്റിംഗ് പദ്ധതി ആവിഷ്കരിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആഭ്യന്തര ടൂറിസം പ്രോത്സാഹിപ്പിക്കാനായി പ്രത്യേക മാർക്കറ്റിംഗ് ക്യാമ്പയിന് തന്നെ രൂപം നൽകിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. കേരളത്തിലെ സുരക്ഷിതമായ അന്തരീക്ഷം, ആരോഗ്യരംഗത്തെ നേട്ടങ്ങൾ ഇവയൊക്കെ ടൂറിസം മാർക്കറ്റിംഗ് ഉപയോഗിക്കാനാണ് തീരുമാനം. ഈ പ്രതിസന്ധി കാലത്തും എല്ലായ്പ്പോഴും എന്ന പോലെ സ്വകാര്യ മേഖലയുമായി സഹകരിച്ചാണ് സർക്കാർ പ്രവർത്തിക്കുന്നത്. ഇന്ത്യയിലെ ടൂറിസം രംഗത്ത് കേരളത്തിലുള്ള സൂപ്പർ ബ്രാൻഡ് എന്ന പദവി നിലനിർത്താനും കോവിഡ് കാലത്തിന് മുമ്പുള്ള അവസ്ഥയിലേക്ക് കേരള ടൂറിസം അതിവേഗം എത്തിച്ചേരുമെന്നുള്ള കാര്യത്തിൽ യാതൊരു സംശയവുമില്ല. തൊഴിലവസരങ്ങൾ സൃഷ്ടിക്കുന്നതിലും സാമ്പത്തിക വളർച്ച ഉറപ്പുവരുത്തുന്നതിലും ടൂറിസം മേഖല വഹിക്കുന്ന പങ്ക് കണ്ടറിഞ്ഞാണ് ഈ രംഗത്ത് വിവിധ പദ്ധതികൾ ആസൂത്രണം ചെയ്ത് നടപ്പാക്കി വരുന്നത്. ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ ഈ പ്രതിസന്ധി താൽക്കാലികമാണെന്നും അതിവേഗം തന്നെ പഴയ വളർച്ചാ നിരക്കിലേക്ക് കേരള ടൂറിസം എത്തിച്ചേരുമെന്നും ഉറപ്പാണ്. കേരള ലുക്ക് അഹെഡ് എന്ന പേരിൽ സംഘടിപ്പിക്കുന്ന ഈ അന്താരാഷ്ട്ര കോൺഫറൻസിൽ ടൂറിസം സെഷനിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്ന എല്ലാവരും ഈ രംഗത്ത് ദീർഘകാല പരിചയമുള്ളവരാണ്. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ വളരെ സാർത്ഥകമായ ചർച്ചകളും അഭിപ്രായങ്ങളും ഈ സെഷനിൽ ഉണ്ടാകുമെന്ന് കരുതിക്കൊണ്ട് എല്ലാ ഭാവുകങ്ങളും നേർന്നുകൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ നിർത്തുന്നു. നമസ്കാരം.
Thank you, sir, for your comprehensive presentation. Mr. Kadagambally Surendran has been leading the tourism department in the state for the last 4.5 years very capably. And as he himself pointed out, the Department of Tourism has been embarking on several new projects, opening up destinations and focusing on preservation of heritage, built heritage in the state. I would now call upon the first speaker among our panelists. It is with great pleasure that I want to introduce my colleague, Mr. Suman Billa, who joins us from Madrid, Spain. Mr. Suman Billa belongs to the Indian Administrative Service, but is now known the world over as the authoritative voice of tourism in the UN World Tourism Organization. Educated at the Madras Christian College, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and the London School of Economics, Suman joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1996 and has held several responsible positions, several of them in tourism. He was my successor as director of the Kerala Tourism, and also my successor as secretary in the Department of Tourism. He later went to the Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, and served with distinction as Joint Secretary in the ministry. Mr. Billa, I'm sure, will enlighten us about the global trends in tourism and what the future has in store for Kerala. Suman, over to you.
Thank you, sir. It's always a pleasure to be introduced by your mentor. When I left for the Government of India in 2014, I said that in my farewell speech that I may be wearing the cap of Incredible India, but my DNA will always remain Kerala tourism. So it's always a pleasure to circle back and come to Kerala. So let me quickly give you a little overview of what is happening around the world and then see as to how Kerala fits into that picture. So last week, the UNWTO has issued a statement and has officially certified 2020 as the worst year in the history of tourism. We've had international tourist arrivals have dropped by 74%. This is in comparison to 2009 when we've had a 4% drop because of the global economic crisis. So that is the scale. So what this means in numbers is that we have had 1 billion less international tourist arrivals. In terms of tourism exports, the number has dropped by 1.3 trillion US dollars, and we have had job losses of about 100 to 120 million direct jobs across the world. Now, this is something that is unprecedented. In terms of areas, regions, the Asia Pacific has done the worst with a drop of 84%. Europe has done marginally better at 70%. And most of the business that has actually been transacted in 2020 was in the first quarter of the year when travel has happened unhindered till about March or so. And of course, Europe had covered about 4 to 5% because they opened up sometime in late summer last year for their tourism sector. So they've been able to shore up some of their numbers. But generally, the situation is bad. And if we look at 2021, I think the prospects for 2021 have worsened from the way the pandemic is playing out, especially in Europe, because cases are rising like never before, and the containment of the virus is still a far call from where we would like it to be. So one of the interesting things that the UNWTO has done is that we've picked experts from all across the world and we have polled them on 2 questions. The first question is, when do you think that tourism will rebound, will make a rebound? And most of them think that it will be the 3rd quarter of 2021 before we see tourism, international travel coming back on track. The second question that we've asked them is, when do you think that we will come back to the pre-pandemic levels? And on that, the opinion is divided. About half of them think that the pre-pandemic levels will be reached in 2023, and the other half think that it's going to be 2024 before we reach the pre-pandemic levels. So that's pretty much out there. Now, if you look at how the governments are responding, I think most of the governments are coming around to the position which can be explained in 4 statements, short statements as it were. All of them think that health first, tourism next. The second thing that they come around is that no international travel is possible without the containment of virus. The third thing is that domestic travel is only possible insofar as your overall health situation allows you to happen. And the fourth more important thing is most of them are taking a position that they will only talk about revival and look at revival plans once they see light at the end of the tunnel. Now, we think that the vaccination that has started is perhaps the much awaited light at the end of the tunnel. But one of the things that we also know is that the speed at which vaccination is happening is running a little bit slow. In Europe, they were thinking that they will complete the vaccination by the end of May, but because of production difficulties and because of logistical issues, it looks like that date is going to be pushed anywhere to September to October of this year. So there are going to be delays. India has done extremely well. We've inoculated 1 million people in 11 days, but there is still going to be some time for us before we're able to come to that critical mass. The silver bullet that most of the people seem to be talking about for international travel is the vaccination passports. Now, simply put, it means that if you have been vaccinated and you have an electronically verifiable certificate, you can travel unhindered to all across the world. Now, that is the idea, but there are still 2 or 3 critical issues that need to be addressed on that, and we're still waiting for a clear information on that. The first is that do those who are vaccinated, are they capable of carrying the virus? Because all of us know if you're vaccinated, the chances of you falling ill are limited. But if it allows you to become an asymptomatic carrier and therefore the risk to the others still remains, then the viability of the vaccination passport itself will need to be reconsidered. The second issue that we need to look at is the principle of efficiency, because there are a few vaccine candidates out there. Some of them have a success rate of 90%. There are some which are just about middling at just over 50%. Now, how do we treat these vaccines on the basis of efficacy? And the third, and the World Health Organization is grappling with it strongly, is the principle of equity. Are we going to create a world in which there are going to be vaccine haves and have-nots, and how is this going to play, and is that going to be discriminatory? There are some moral and ethical issues that need to be considered for us to look at. But overall, I think most of the countries and most of the industry seems to be in favor of rolling ahead with the vaccine passport if we are able to get it within a framework that works. So I think the way forward for the world is largely going to be centered around 2 pillars. The first is going to be coordination. It would mean that all the governments will have to coordinate with each other on their health protocols and how do they work with each other, because international travel cannot happen on the basis of unilateral decisions. The second is the principle of trust. And I think both coordination and trust go far beyond just the government ambit, because for coordination, we need all of the tourism stakeholders, all of the aviation stakeholders, health stakeholders, etc., across the board to come around and coordinate to make sure that travel is safe and possible. And similarly, all of us have to raise our game and ensure that there is trust to be able to draw people out of their comfort zone and be able to travel. Now, some of the countries which are largely dependent upon international tourists have been severely affected, especially so the case with the small island developing states like the Maldives, like the Caribbean, etc., whose total revenues account for about 70 to 75% from international tourists alone. And therefore, for them, the main source of sustenance is gone. But several of the large countries which have a critical mass of domestic demand are in a reasonably better position to be able to tide over the crisis with minimal pain. If you look at India, I think we're in a propitious position because we welcome 11 million international tourists into India every year, but we send out 25 million of them abroad in a single year. And this 25 million spends cumulatively a staggering 26 billion US dollars on their trips abroad. So if we are able to tap into this purchasing power, and if we are able to work on this critical mass, I think the Indian tourism sector will be able to tide over the issue in a reasonable manner. Now, when we look at Kerala, I think Kerala has, looking at the situation, I think Kerala has several advantages, even on a global scale. The first advantage we have is that there are changing consumer preferences now. One of the things that has gone out of preference now is that consumers no longer prefer these high volume, low margin, mass-based tourism products. They are looking for more meaningful, more authentic products. And I think Kerala has a value proposition sitting right out there. The second is that the pandemic has also triggered concerns about health and wellness, and people are looking at ensuring their health and wellness like never before. And I think Kerala, with its as a global leader in Ayurveda and holistic healthcare, can cash in very strongly on that. The third point that we have in our favor is that most of our destinations are leisure destinations, insofar as they are not very crowded, and they yield to some sort of social distancing, and I think that's a big advantage. The fourth is that we have houseboats which are naturally self-isolating. So I think there's going to be, as and when the markets and people start traveling, I expect houseboat business to pick up rather quickly. The fifth, and in the same vein, is the homestays, because all across the world, we see a trend of a rising preference for homestays because people are more wary about going into crowded places like hotel lobbies and elevators where the risk of infection is going to be higher. But the thing about homestays is that it does not yield itself to easy equation like that, because we also need to communicate and tell that traveler that first we have protocols which are followed in homestays so that he are safe, and second we also need to brand those protocols in a way so that we are able to communicate effectively. Essentially, when you go to a Taj or to an ITC hotel, you are assured that there is a certain level of cleanliness and hygiene. We need to instill that level of confidence amongst users who want to go to use our homestays now. As far as the international market goes, I think we believe that it's going to open up in dribbles. There will be markets which will slowly open up, and as and when those markets come on, the competition is going to be intense. There are many countries out there who are desperate for that business. So, and the way they are going to approach these markets is going to change. It's no longer going to be the regular media planning that we used to do. It's going to be hyper local. It's going to be hyper aggressive. It's going to be hyper targeted, and most of it will happen on the digital medium. And the second element that we need to understand is that when international travel opens up, there are some destinations which will rebound faster and quickly on the back of a strong perception of hygiene and safety. And we expect the European destinations to bounce back first. And I think India on that parameter is perhaps going to be somewhere in the middle or thereabouts. So even if the international picks up for the rest of the world, I think there's going to be a little bit of a lag before international travel to India will pick up. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. So I think, to my mind, and assuming that Kerala, even today, 90% of the tourists who come to Kerala are actually domestic, I think it's important for us to focus on the domestic market, and we need to look at how we can deepen our engagement with the domestic markets, because the traditional paradigm of purchasing power being in tier 1 and tier 2 cities has shifted. There are a lot many people in the tier 3 and tier 4 cities who have the top dollar paying ability and who are able to go on holidays. I think we need to be able to communicate with them effectively to be able to draw them to Kerala. As most of us know, the Indian tourists over the past few years have been spending the top dollar on equal terms, if not better, certainly on better terms for F&B services than the international tourists. So I think we are in a reasonably good space to look at that. The other element that most of us also see now, and importantly, is the rise of the OTPs, or the online travel platforms. So essentially what it means is the rise of technology, and a lot of business is moving onto the technology platform. So we will need to gear ourselves and prepare ourselves to be able to work with the online travel platforms. Now, one risk that the OTPs have as against the traditional tour operator is that extreme speed in switching. They may be selling your product today, tomorrow if they've got something else, they may switch over to the next one. So one of the elements that you need to do is perhaps for Kerala Tourism to get on and take a position as a tourism board on the OTP, and then you have several of the private players also going, so as to create some sort of a buffer and critical mass on that. And that's a strategy that several tourism boards are looking at. The next thing that we need to look at is that we see a lot of change in the demography of people who are traveling. Increasingly, those who are traveling now are the youngsters who are a little more risk takers, whose immunity levels are higher. So essentially what this means is that products also need to change to be able to make sense to them. No longer are they just interested in going to beautiful places and staying in comfortable lodgings, but they also need to indulge in activities which yield to Instagrammable moments. So I think Kerala will have to do that value add of trying to create those Instagrammable moments to be able to capture those guys. And I think we have several of those, the potential. I think we just need to put that together. So whatever it is that Kerala does, I think it's very clear that we need to do it within a framework of responsible tourism. And unless we are able to show the visibility of the benefits to the community, tourism in Kerala is not going to be moving ahead. In terms of investments, there are several ways that investments come in. There's public investment and there's private investment. Public investments largely come through the state government or through the government of India, and we have private investments which come from the private sector. But it doesn't matter to my mind who is investing. But the most critical thing is that every rupee that goes in as public investment must be matched by a commensurate investment from the private sector to make it happen. The world is full of destinations where governments have gone and developed, fantastic public infrastructure, but there are no restaurants for people to eat and there are no beds for people to stay, and therefore they are looking, challenging. So I think when a COVID situation, when we are going to be much more challenged to do the resources, it's important for us to optimize. So I think both the governments and the private sector need to work together to see as to how they make the best use of the limited resources that we have at this time. And to the question of whether the local bodies should be empowered, I think it doesn't matter who is doing it, as long as they have the ability, the bandwidth to do that, and the financial resources to be able to attract investments. It doesn't matter whether it's the local bodies or whoever is doing it. But I think the issue of having the bandwidth to do is critical, because several years ago we had a spate of CRZ cases in the High Court, and when the courts found that almost all of them, the panchayats have given them clear certificates, and then the court had actually made a remark saying that it's okay to empower them with the powers, but you also need to make sure that they have the capacity to do that. So I think I'm all for moving ahead with local bodies, but we need to train them well to be able to adapt to that. The other big trend that we see, and which is going to play very strongly for Kerala, is that the consumer preferences the world over are changing. We are looking at a situation where consumers are looking more at environmental costs beyond economic costs. And governments are actually channeling that and trying to set their policy to change these needs. So several destinations across the world today are looking at going towards zero carbon footprint, zero food miles, etc. And I think that is an area where Kerala has a head start, because even before the world came around to this, for decades now, we've been working on our responsible tourism. And we have several destinations which are RT certified, and we've done a tremendous job. And I think the way forward for us is going to be able to broad base this so that we have responsible tourism. The entire destination, the entire state becomes a responsible tourism destination. And that is going to be our calling card and our USP to be able to tap into the market. It makes excellent commercial sense, because all things being equal, people all over the world will always opt for something that is responsible and that tugs at their moral heartstrings. So I think for Kerala, we have a great start there. I think we need to push forward. In skill development, I think we've done excellent work, especially at the skill level. There are Kutumbashri units which work all across within the responsible tourism framework. And I think that is something that we need to strengthen and take forward. And at the managerial level, I think we are churning out some of the best talent in the country. We have some very fine education institutions, KITS and others, who are bringing out excellent talent. We have Foodcraft institutes again, who churn out good talent. But the problem is that Kerala is becoming a training ground for the Middle East, because when somebody passes out of college, he works for 2 years in Kerala and then he goes on to the Middle East. And I think this is an issue that the industry should be grappling with, because if we want to become a world-class destination, we should be able to retain world-class talent. We should be able to keep the best talent, which means that we need to pay them well, and more importantly, be able to show them a career progression and a career graph as they go ahead. And I think that is something that we need to look at. One trend that we see all over the world is multitasking, because most of the hotels and establishments are not going to afford one person for every job. So typically for tour operators, there's one fellow who sits in the office. He also goes out and conducts tours. In hotels, we see the trend where the front office people are also helping out with other activities. So I think we need to also move our workforce towards multitasking. So on the last point that I want to speak about sustainable growth is, if we look at it from an Indian perspective, I think Kerala's growth has been stupendous and it's a great model. But when we look at it from a global perspective, there are several other destinations which have done equally well. So I think for Kerala, there is still significant headroom which is still left. The northern part of the state is still largely untapped for tourism, and I think that's where the opportunity is, and we need to move ahead. The second thing that we need to understand is, most of the markets that we have traditionally, we need to deepen the engagement. Now, one of the exercises that I did when I was Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism, when we prepared the media plan, was to look at, for example, a country like the UK, and look at how many people are actually traveling out from from the UK and see what is the percentage of that we are getting actually into India. And in the case of most of our traditional markets, it's close to about 1 to 2%. And in case of Kerala, it's going to be much smaller. So when we go there and take an exposure to the market, it always works. You get the flywheel effect, and you're going to be able to gain more through spending incrementally less to deepen the market. So I think there is a great case for us to deepen the market. The second is that if Kerala has to, really go to the next level, I think we need to find a compelling story which will take it to the next level. And I think that story, to my mind, is the spice state, because there are several countries in the world. Kerala has always been the melting pot of cultures, of history, of heritage, and there are several countries out there who can actually come to Kerala and find traces of their own heritage and how they have interacted, and it's a fascinating story by themselves. And what it means is that it also gives us an opportunity to deepen the engagement in almost all the traditional markets that Kerala has. So I think that is a push that we need to look at, and I think that is certainly, with international cooperation, it's worth doing. And lastly, I think whatever it is that we do, we need to do it within the framework of responsibility. And it is not just moral positioning. It is for us. It is essential. There is no other way for us to do, because Kerala inherently resists change unless you're able to build the consensus and get everybody around the table. And the only way you're ever going to be able to build a consensus is to line up the community behind you and ensure that all the parameters that you look at in responsible tourism are met, and that the people are also benefiting as much from the tourism sector as the entrepreneurs. So I will not be too worried about wanting to grow at a rapid pace. If we grow incrementally, I'm okay. But I want to make sure that we grow responsibly, because that's the only way for us to grow. And that's the only way that we will sustain over a long period of time. So those are my initial comments, and I'm open to taking any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Billa. I think in his presentation, Mr. Suman Billa has taken us through a scenario which started in rather depressing terms, giving us a reality check as to when the industry will start looking up. But I think the important point that we all from Kerala should focus upon are the points, very, very significant points that he made in the latter part of the presentation. He talks about deepening the engagement. I think that's a very important thing. He talks about building on responsible tourism and on our strengths, about spice route, about heritage, about zero carbon. So the things that Kerala will be able to offer as a destination needs to change, and we have to make sure that we engage with our clientele, with our potential customers, tug at their heartstrings, and we have to fight to retain the world-class talent instead of losing them to other competing destinations. Thank you, Mr. Billa. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions. We are running a little short of time, so I will not, without further ado, I'll invite the presentation from the next speaker, who happens to be Ms. Christina Beckman. Now, Christina works very closely with small businesses. She is the Vice President of the Global Strategy for Adventure Travel Trade Association and the co-founder for Tomorrow's Air. She works out of the US, and because of the adverse time zone issues, Christina has sent us her presentation. She wanted to be here in person, but I think asking her to be awake at 3:30 in the morning is a little too much. So Christina leads ATTA's research program, workshops around the world focusing on entrepreneurs and local market expansion. She has served as an advisor to the National Geographic Center for Sustainable Development and the World Travel and Tourism Council, and to startup technology companies providing services to the adventure travel market. Her expertise includes adventure tourism concepts, policies to promote sustainable tourism, and policies to support entrepreneurship, and specialized research covers environment, tourism, entrepreneurship, and technology. So we'll hear from Christina next.
afternoon. My name is Chris Beckman. I am speaking to you from Santa Fe, New Mexico in the United States. I'm really happy to be here this afternoon. I have a few slides I'll share. Let's see if you present. So, my name is Christina Beckman. I'm speaking today on behalf of Venture Travel. Tomorrow's air is a great opportunity to be talk about Kerala and the Kerala, one of my favorite coastal destinations. So the future of active travel is a nation. I will get started. A little bit about me. I have a background in international development, consulting with 15 years and more, actually focused on adventure tourism. I worked in India, in Assam, in the West Bengal on ecotourism and climate project there through the World Bank. I've been in Kerala. This is a picture from years ago, actually. Now, include the International Corporation, the World Feller, and places looking for ways to see tourism used as a solution for rural economic development. In the Adventure Travel Trade which brought me to tomorrow's there. Founder, colleagues in Australia. My name is Christina Beckman. I am speaking to you from Santa Fe, New Mexico in the United States. I'm really happy to be here this afternoon. I have a few slides I'll share. Let's see if I can get to those. View, present. So, as I mentioned, my name is Christina Beckman. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Adventure Travel Trade Association and Tomorrow's Air. It's a great opportunity to be talking about Kerala and the future in Kerala, one of my favorite coastal destinations. So the future of active travel in coastal destinations. I will get started. A little bit about me. I have a background in international development, consulting with 15 years and more, actually focused on nature and adventure tourism. I've worked in a lot of different places in India. In Assam, I was in the Sundarbans area of West Bengal on ecotourism and climate action project there through the World Bank. I've been in Kerala, of course, and in Rajasthan. This is a picture of me from a few years ago, actually now, in Kerala with my friend, Dr. Vinoy. The kinds of clients I've had in the past include the International Finance Corporation, the World Bank, Rockefeller Foundation, places looking for ways to see tourism used as a solution for rural economic development. In 2013, I joined the Adventure Travel Trade Association, where I am the Vice President for Global Strategy. I focus on our consumer sector, and also on climate action, which brought me to Tomorrow's Air. I'm the co-founder with Nim de Swart, my colleague who's in Australia, of Tomorrow's Air, which is carbon removal through direct air capture with permanent storage. I'll say a little bit about that at the end. And I just close my introduction by saying I'm a huge fan of Kerala. And if you want to learn any more about me, you can visit ChristinaBeckman.com. This is my son, Jack. I put these pictures in. I think it's important to just sort of let people know where you're coming from when you're giving a presentation. So philosophically, you know, my personal philosophy, I am working on an equitable and prosperous future for all, and that's really driven by my family, as I'm sure it is for lots of us. So that perspective informs, in my personal life, informs so much of my professional work. I love to travel with my son. This is a picture from before coronavirus, November of 2019 in Cambodia. All right, well, so topics I want to cover today, I'm going to share some information, research that have some projections for what we can expect with travel and what adventure travelers are interested in. And I think what the research shows is that there's a real desire for authentic and natural destinations. I'll share some detail on that. I think it suits Kerala perfectly. And then I'll close with a discussion on the importance of sustainability and understanding specifically carbon emissions and how we can start to take action there. So the first study I want to share with you is from the US Adventure Traveler Sentiment. We conducted this research June through July of 2020 in partnership with Euromonitor International and 2031 Consulting. This research is available for free on the Adventure Travel Trade Association website. If you go to research, you can drop down through there and you'll see all the tiles for different studies. So what we see from the United States with travelers is they're prioritizing safe and relaxing adventure travel destinations with nature, outdoor, and adventure activities. This is, really bodes well for coastal destinations, for Kerala. The red bars here are the adventure travelers, and the blue bars are the comparison with the average, sort of the mainstream US consumer. And we got that data from a Euromonitor study. So as you can see here on the left, 72% of adventure travelers are looking for nature and outdoor activities, and 12% are interested in ecotourism and sustainable travel options. So there really is an audience that is interested in specifically what you have to offer in Kerala. I included this slide because I think it shows that contrary to what we might expect, people are thinking and dreaming about international travel again. And as we can see here, more than half, 53% of people are thinking of vacationing abroad. 8% of those in the United States are looking at neighboring countries. 45%, however, are looking at more far-flung destinations. So another encouraging sign for travel's recovery. Environmental considerations are a strong factor in decision-making, however, and I think the research really gives us some pointers on our product development and also our marketing. So the question asked here was, when traveling in the future, will climate change be on your mind? And we see here that 66% of people said they're worried about climate change. 66% said they would like to know if their travel spending was helping to fight the climate crisis, whether that's through offsets or even decisions around vegetarian meals, different modes of transport, electric vehicles, for example. 78% said they feel good buying eco and ethical products, and 81% believe they can make a difference with their actions and choices. The takeaway really here is to bring the values of your business forward and let people know. What I discovered in Kerala was there was a lot of sustainable business that was just operating that way, sort of in a de facto, it's just sort of how they operated. It's really, that is a value to consumers now, if you can let people know, sort of unfold all the good that you're doing and help them realize the ways in which their money is benefiting the environment or benefiting the local community. Conversely, if you sort of look inside at your business and see that maybe your business isn't benefiting the community or the environment, now is a great time to make some adjustments there. You'll be able to promote that very effectively right now. I want to share also some data from another research piece we did. This one was in partnership with the International Finance Corporation. It's also available on our website. It's called Shaping the Future of Adventure and Cultural Travel. And a lot of this research was focused on developing recommendations for Pacific Islands. So I think the results here are also relevant for Kerala. So we identified 3 key personas in this research: adventure intensive, experience samplers, and cultural explorers. As you can kind of guess their focal areas from those names. The adventure intensive persona is motivated by aggressive, I guess, hard adventure. And experienced samplers are more mainstream. They're sort of mixing nature and outdoor activities with the cultural experiences. Cultural explorers are motivated by learning and cultural immersion and connection. So these are 3 specific categories that we know are prominent, outbound US and outbound Australia. We also found that the activities, so across these 3 personas, I pulled these up because these activities resonate across these personas. Immersive local community experiences, culinary and food-focused holidays, camping, backpacking, hiking, snorkeling, horseback riding, and bird watching. When I was reflecting on these results, thinking about this presentation, I realized that lots of this is very present in Kerala. And so I think as you look at what kinds of experiences to market, whether to trade partners or direct to consumers, you can feature and highlight these sorts of experiences that either intermix these kinds of activities or are solely focused on these sorts of activities. And I would also suggest that now is a great time, when you don't have as many visitors, perhaps now is a great time to really fine tune those offerings in these activity categories. So practical, easy recommendations. I just said a couple previously. For planned itineraries, make sure that you're mixing cultural heritage with outdoor activities, visiting heritage sites, cycling, bird watching. A mix of things is great. Emphasizing independent and self-guided aspects. We know that people are going to be a little more leery of traveling in groups. So there may be more independent and self-guided travelers. So if you have experiences and products that can be shaped to be done independently, now is a great time for that. And making sure that the materials that you have to support people guiding themselves are well written and easy to access. And a recommendation I think that people have heard often, but really has to be said over and over: feature local aspects authentically. So invite people to be present when something is happening authentically, if that's appropriate. But I think performances are always less interesting than feeling like you're sort of part of a cultural event that's happening. Here in New Mexico, we have something called Night of the Dead, Dios de los Muertos. And it is an incredible thing. If you were to watch it as a performance, I think it would be scary. But if you're here in town and you happen to see this happening, it's a really wonderful experience to be part of. A few more challenging ideas. So I think some of the suggestions I just offered were probably not earth-shattering or things you have never thought of before. Maybe the self-guided emphasis is especially timely right now. But I want to draw our attention to some more challenging ideas, which are around sustainability and climate. Perhaps you saw the sustainability report from the UNDP, People's Climate Vote. This study was just released earlier this week. There were 1.2 million respondents from 50 countries. That's 56% of the global population. So the earlier studies I was sharing we're talking about travelers from the United States or originating in Australia. Here we're talking about people from all around the world. So that's we really do have some consensus here. 64% of people said that climate change was an emergency. And the highest level of support came from small island developing states, followed by high income countries, middle income, and lesser developed countries. What this suggests for travel and tourism is that this is a very important time to look at how your businesses operate and how you're marketing those businesses, and see if there are ways you can improve on sustainability and climate, and how you message what you're doing to let your travelers know so they can feel good about their travel with you. Sustainability is really a mindset. I was having a conversation this morning with Paloma Zapata from Sustainable Travel International. Some of you may be familiar with her. And I mentioned that I was giving this presentation, and she said, you know, community and environment should just be at the heart of every decision. That's like the rule of thumb that will guide all the other decisions. So, you know, and I think about that practically, whether it's thinking about transport or lodging or shopping, where you take your guests, how you advise and educate them, local suppliers, local materials, considering various modes of transport, any way we can start to minimize the fossil fuel use in transportation will help. And educating visitors on how to identify these local products and local suppliers, and how to think for themselves and make decisions that are smart while they're in the country. There is some research that shows that travelers at home feel very empowered around making sustainable decisions, and yet when they travel, they don't know where to go to sort of make those same kind of decisions. So even though at home they would never buy a plastic water bottle, when they travel, they do. And this is just what we can do in the travel industry is unfold the sustainable options, and also make sure that we're doing all we can to transform our experiences, our services, to make them more sustainable. I included this one to start looking at all the experiences and services we offer with our carbon dioxide emissions eye. Once you start training your emissions eye on everything, you can see it's systemic, and it's hard to pull it apart totally. We have to start small, but look carefully at your business and look for places where you can reduce emissions. And every place you can, you should talk about that also. So emissions result from all aspects of the tourism experience. We know that travel, when you think of it end to end, is 8% of global carbon dioxide emissions. Transport, obviously planes get everybody's attention, but also, you know, the energy in accommodations, meals, food choices, transport. These are all pieces that we can start to evolve and transform. So I offer this Climate Action Pledge at the Adventure Travel Trade Association under the Climate Action tab. We have a pledge. It offers a really interesting, I think, sort of starting point for thinking about changes that you might make in your business. On this pledge, we suggest that you check all that apply, which means you could just check one item in each of these categories. But if you're wondering where to start, this is an interesting framework. There are a multitude of frameworks out there, and it's good to take some time, research that a little bit. If travel is slow right now, it is an excellent opportunity to start looking into this. Sometimes I hear from small businesses that it's just the monumental task of starting to dig in to the supply chain and understand carbon emissions at every level is too daunting. So, you know, start small. And the pledge is an interesting place because it can give you a couple little categories where you can start chipping away at it. Also involving your other staff. I think I have definitely learned from some of our partners that when one person starts talking about it, other people kind of join in. So if this is not already a priority for you, I encourage you to consider that. This is another research report, State of Climate Action Research. We published this in January of 2020. It's kind of a baseline for what companies were doing pre-COVID, how they were thinking about climate and the kinds of changes they're making. I encourage you to have a look at that if if you're thinking about how to get started in this area. And then when you're ready to take action, so Tomorrow's Air is a tool. So, you know, the best thing to do is to assess your personal situation, make a policy, get thinking around how you want to proceed. And when you're ready to actually start taking action, so offsetting your emissions and also removing emissions. So conventional offsetting, supporting tree planting, supporting local projects. These are great and worthy things to do. Alongside that, we've learned that negative emissions technologies, direct air capture in particular, is something that we will need to keep our Earth's temperature from warming more than 1.5 degrees. There are trillions of tons of excess carbon dioxide emissions stored in the atmosphere. We need to accelerate the pace at which we pull those emissions from the atmosphere, and we need to store them permanently. And that is what direct air capture can do. So I encourage you to learn more about this if you're curious. You can visit the Tomorrow's Air website. Another great resource is called airminers.org. And that is all. I really encourage you also send me an email if you have questions. I think it's a great time to be an island destination. And I think what you have in Kerala is perfectly tuned to where people's minds are going to be as they're coming out of coronavirus. They're going to want the slow pace. They're going to want the natural experiences. Do everything you can to make those as sustainable as possible. Thank you so much.
On behalf of the organizers, I'd like to thank those who have questions or sorry, am I audible now? Right. So I wanted to say thank you to Christina. She's taken the trouble of loading this and sending it to us. If you have any questions, as Christina's last slide said, she is available to for a discussion. Her email was there on the last slide. Thank you. We are running a little short of time, so I will not get into any comments. I would now invite the next speaker for today's session, Professor Nimit Ranjan Chaudhary. Nimit is an old friend, and I must say that when I was writing my book, I'm not in the habit of writing books, but when I decided to take the plunge, I decided that I needed to ask someone knowledgeable about, you know, all that stuff I was churning out about marketing. And Nimit was the person, my go-to guy. I know that many of you may not be familiar with Nimit. It's high time we all became familiar with him. Nimit is the head of department of the Department of Tourism and Hospitality Management at the Jamia Millia Islamia. He's got 26 years of experience. He was a mechanical engineering graduate with a PhD. Can you hear me? With a PhD in management, 27 years of experience, excuse me. He has been teaching in across the country, in Mizoram, in the Gwalior, Noida, and Nellore, called schools of the Indian Institute of Tourism and Travel Management, and now, of course, at the Jamia. He also has extensive international experience, having taken courses in Mexico, in China, in Spain, Sweden, and Slovenia. He has been recently chosen for the prestigious LEAP program at Oxford. His research focuses on destination marketing, tourism entrepreneurship, and guiding and interpretation. Nimit has supervised 15 PhDs and authored and edited 12 books and contributed more than 125 research papers. Over to you, Professor Chaudhary.
Honorable Minister for Tourism, State of Kerala, Venu sir, Suman Saab, Professor Goodwin, Deepak Devaji, Christina in absentia, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to all of you. And before anything else, let me take this opportunity to place on record my appreciation and my gratitude for the organizers, that is the Kerala Planning Board, for allowing me this opportunity to be in the company of such accomplished thinkers and speakers. When I was discussing my role on this panel with Venu sir, he said that probably I need to be, maybe I can talk about tourism marketing in a post-COVID scenario. And then I looked around and realized that there have been a lot of, experimentation in terms of marketing and other things. So I chose to focus on a few issues. But to begin with, let us understand that most information, most results, most of the data that is available with us suggests that in India, at least, we have, almost kind of survived this COVID-19. We aren't there. I mean, not many symptoms of a second or a third wave, and so we are placed to be talking about revival of tourism, and then maybe how do we thrive in a post-COVID scenario. As I said, there are a lot of marketing gimmicks or marketing at a tactical level, or as I call it, marketing experiments that have been conducted all over the place. And so I thought that instead of that, I'll be talking about, two main things during my, my opening remarks on this panel. One, these are not at the micro level. I'll be talking more about the macro level. And the first thing that I suggest is that we need to apply discretion. And to support this, I'll talk about a two factors theory. And then looking forward beyond revival. And in that case, I'll suggest moving beyond experiences, and I'll explain what I mean. But first, let me talk a bit about the two factors theory, which says that at any destination, there would be qualifying factors and vantage factors. Always they were there. And in any scenario, in fact, in a post-COVID scenario also, there would be qualifying and vantage factors. What are these factors? Qualifying factors are the bare essentials, and they should be performed to a minimal level. And if they are not performed to this minimal level, they are grossly going to dissatisfy the customer. But on the flip side, if you overdo these qualifying factors, if you overwork them, they're not going to create additional value for the customer, and therefore may not result into additional, satisfaction for the customer. And therefore, the suggestion is to restrict them to a minimal threshold value. As against this, you have vantage factors. Absence of these factors will not dissatisfy your customer, but their presence would definitely going to excite the customers, because these are the differentiators. They are going to help your customers take a decision why they should be choosing destination A over destination B, or a tourism product A over the competitors' offerings. And therefore, companies in the long run, destinations in the longer run, need to be working on them to attract and to excite their customers. Now, what are these factors? when I look at a, pandemic situation or the situation that we are in, health and hygiene protocols, everyone is talking about them. They are very important, very essential. Technology and digitization, safety and security, these are all qualifying factors. They have to be there. In their absence, it's going to be, your customer is going to grow skeptical. He'll be apprehensive. And so you cannot do away with them. But what I'm suggesting is that while everyone is talking about it, there have to be some vantage factors also. There have to be certain products, certain offerings that differentiate the destination or your company's offer in the longer run with a brand and buzz. And mind this phrase, they need to offer you a competitive advantage which is sustainable in the longer run. So these are the vantage factors. Why I'm talking about these factors? Because these are the two things that I'm going to talk now. What most of the destinations are doing is having a tactical approach. To a certain extent, it is desirable that destinations and companies are rushing for health and hygiene measures. But what we need to understand is that not all measures will survive. Some won't be effective, some won't resonate with the travelers, and some will prove impossible to deliver consistently with the scale. So you cannot, hope that since you are a destination which is like you created a buzz that you are very safe and very secure, is the only guarantee for you to have these customers. On the flip side, we need to understand a few things, that these additional measures are going to add to the cost. The demand is already on the downside. The estimates suggested by different researchers, and the speakers before me say that this demand probably will come back to the pre-COVID level only somewhere in 2023 or 2024. So the demand is not there, the cost is high, and every destination or almost every company in the business is trying to make up for the losses that they've had in the previous year. So look at the kind of competition that is ahead of us. Every destination is making that extra effort, to have a pie in this business and in this market. This is a popular ad that I picked up, ad from Kerala Tourism. And this ad was about the change of air, where this family is traveling or wants to travel, and they're in fact traveling, they're heading for Kerala. The mother or the lady of the house is skeptical, and she says she's like very particular about health and hygiene thing. And then the next frame, they are in Kerala, in lush green valleys and enjoying the fresh air and other things. So that is where I picked up that what I'm skipping this because this is an ad from the state, but I'm just trying to say that there's a certain amount of skepticism. And then there was this frame where the family is in Kerala and they're enjoying the nature and the wilderness here. The other thing that I wanted to talk today was to call everybody's attention towards how the markets, the modern commerce and business have grown. Look, it all started as a commodity. I mean, in most of the cases, it was commodities that were being traded. And then someone came up with this idea of branding. They said, look, my commodity or my offer is different from your commodity, or the offer that you are making or the competitors are making. They branded it, tried to create that differentiation. And that is why on the vertical axis, we have these differentiators. While on the x-axis, we are saying premium. So if you can create an increased differentiation, you can charge a premium. So we started, doing business in products. And then we said that no, to differentiate, we'll be offering some more facilities, some abstract elements that add value to a customer's demand or to customers what customers are expecting. And that is where we shifted the entire competition from commodities to products to services. Around 15 years back, when I started talking about tourism, when I started training people and especially tour guides, one of the catchphrases that we were using was that please understand that tourism is not about seeing and viewing places. It's about an experience. It's about a visitor's immersion into experience. And what we used to suggest tour guides was, when we used to train them, was that your job is to facilitate this immersion. How does a visitor immerse so that the business or the competition shifts from services to experiences? Services, we standardize them with those standard operating procedures. So how does the company or how does the destination differentiates itself? By creating a differentiated experience. What next? Is creating an experience the end of it? So that was a question that we wanted to ask, and we wanted to have an answer to this question. And actually in academic circles, when we're talking about a post-COVID scenario, we have just begun to have some initial ideas, initial feelers about what is going to be the next level of competition. And that is precisely the central idea of my discussion here today. What next? And probably the thing that comes up is transformation. Look at the first four things. These are the means. These are the means, whereas transformation is the output. When I say means, this is what suppliers do for the visitors. Whereas when we are talking about transformation, we are talking about what visitors expect would happen to them. What is going to happen to them when they visit a destination? So outcome is important. In a way, all travel is transformational. But we need to understand this, that there's a distinct shift from how good a destination is to what happens to me with a particular travel. So there's a distinct shift in how consumers are believing, have started to think and assess tourism product. Please understand that experience is just a means to an end. It's not the end in itself. End is transformation. A customer, a traveler is seeking transformation. Transformation is an individual's elevation to a higher level, being physically fit, mentally agile, spiritually elevated. And when I say spiritually elevated, I'm talking about a higher level of consciousness. I'm not talking about religious connotations of spiritualism. I'm very strictly talking about non-religious connotation of spiritualism. In service business, we charge a customer for the activities that we perform as a service provider. In the experience business, the charge was for feeling customers get by engaging in an experience. But in transformational business, we charge them, or we are likely to charge them for the benefit consumers or the guest receives by spending time at our destination, engaging with our products, engaging with our offers. And transformational travel to that extent means making time for unplanned exploration, restorative wellness activities, or making, effort to learn about the native flora and fauna at a particular destination at a very tangible level. Transformation is also about connectedness with family, connection with family and friends, with self, and eventually with the larger cosmos. Trying to answer those philosophical questions of origin, who am I, how am I connected to the world, is where individuals grow with the higher level of consciousness. And this travel is not over once you are back home. It's more mindful and intentional travel experience that lasts much more longer than the travel itself. So you get to a place, try to involve into transformation, transform yourself, get back to your place, and remain transformed for a certain amount of time, and then this withers out, and then you look for another travel probably. And that is how, the products are going to work. To support this, I have two pieces of research to quote. One was this East Carolina University 2017 research, which talks about travel motivation of the visitors, the travelers. And look at these. They're saying we are looking for a life-changing experience. We're looking for personal growth and challenge, accomplishment and achievement, gratitude and mindfulness. Friends, this is precisely transformation. They're looking for transformation. Look at another piece of research by Skift in 2019. And their research says that more than 50%, that's around 52% of the traveler, they surveyed 2019 pre-COVID scenario. These travelers are placing increased value on the potential of transformative experience. With the pandemic, having been locked down in our places, we are all the more willing to travel. Travel to nature, travel to wilderness, travel out, because we are seeking this transformation. Probably, and this is just a guess, a guess from my end, that this percentage definitely increases by at least 10 percentage points in a post-COVID scenario, and even more. We don't have research to back this as of now. Just, one more thing that I wanted to share with you, just about one specific product. That look and think that 99.9% of the time of our existence as human beings, we have been close to nature. We have been part and parcel of nature. All this materialistic, tangible, urban life, modern way of life is less than 0.1% of the timeline. Our connect to the nature has to be natural. And there is already a lot of research in place which suggests that this disconnect with nature is one of the prime source of, our mental problems and not being well, mentally well, and feeling stressed and anxious and, depressions and all those things. 80% of people living in urban areas of UK reported that less green means reduced well-being, or at least less opportunity to recover from mental stress. Traveling to nature or countryside promotes individualistic search for meaning, harmony, and connectedness. And this is precisely what I was referring to as higher level of consciousness. Interaction with rural community creates moments of awakening. Deeper human connectivity creates soulful bonds that may have long-term transformative effects. And why I brought in this slide is that these are probably some of the products that India in general and Kerala in particular can focus on, can think of, promoting, because I'm not looking at, there are others who are more responsible, who are doing the firefighting job, but I am also looking, and I want the leaders, the state leadership, the tourism leadership at the national level, the business leadership, some of us at least should be looking at what happens in 2024, 2025, 2026. What kind of products do we have then, so that, when the competition comes back, it matures, how are we going to differentiate our offerings from those of the competitors? What is that probably the consumers, the travel consumers are going to ask for in 2024, 25 and beyond? So my suggestion, to sum up what I wanted to say with my opening remark, is that don't just look for immediate redemption. I'm not saying that's not important, but we need to understand that there's going to be a new world beyond COVID, a new normal. Don't just look for survival and revival, but have an eye on post-revival also. And the second thing that I wanted to say is that focus on outcomes and not just the supply of products and experiences. Transformation will be the key. Make a conscious effort for facilitating transformations. And I'll just pick up from what Suman Sab said, that RT, for example, I mean, Christina also spoke about being responsible. It's not only a question of, moral positioning. It's again a question of a higher level of consciousness among the internal customers at a particular destination. Say, for example, in our case, Kerala. It has to be part of our psyche. It's not a question of a framework, just a framework being in place, or a set of rules, a set of conditions that are imposed artificially over the entire system. It has to be a part of a higher level of consciousness. So probably, and as I'll just repeat I'll second what Suman Saab also said, that maybe in a post-2025 scenario, we can look at non-religious spiritualism derived from rurality, wilderness, products like yoga, meditation, etc. So probably they are going to be the products to watch. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chaudhary. That was a philosophical journey as well. Your presentation actually underlined many of the points made earlier by Mr. Birla and also by Christina. But you took it into a plane that resonates on a separate plane. You made a very strong philosophical point for moving into transformational travel. Running short of time, so I had several responses to that, but I'll now move on to introduce our next speaker, who is not unfamiliar to the audience here. It gives me great pleasure to request Dr. Harold Goodwin to take the stage now. Dr. Goodwin and I go back some years. So we met many years ago, and I had the honor of inviting him in 2008, where Dr. Goodwin and I co-chaired the International Conference on Responsible Tourism, which in many ways kickstarted the entire initiative. The debate, the whole initiative, both by, and so much so today, as the Honorable Minister, is responsible tourism, communities, with local and national governments, and also with inbound and outbound tourism industry. He's the managing director of the Responsible Tourism Partnership, and these days plays a very important role as the chair of the panel of judges for the World Responsible Tourism Awards, which is given in different continents, in Africa, in India, in Latin America. He is the founder director of the International Center for Responsible Tourism, which promotes the principles of the Cape Town Declaration, which is the definitive document on responsible tourism, which was drafted by Dr. Goodwin. Right now, as a responsible tourism advisor for the World Travel Mart, he puts together the flagship responsible tourism program, which attracted 4,000 participants at London, and also programs at WTM Africa, WTM Latin America, and the Arabian travel market. With great pleasure, I would like to invite Dr. Goodwin to make his presentation.
Can I just check that everyone can see my presentation?
Yes, we can, Harold, we can.
Excellent. But Dr. Venu, it's a great pleasure to be in touch with you again. And I wanted to start by thanking Kerala for inviting me to participate in this. I think it's fair to say that much of what I've learned about responsible tourism and shared around the world has actually been learnt in Kerala, and that Kerala has contributed already a great deal to the development of responsible tourism internationally. I don't doubt that Kerala will continue to do that. What I wanted to do is to start by pointing out the critical difference between the idea of sustainability and the idea of sustainable tourism. The problem with sustainability is that it's imprecise, it's an aspiration, it's vague, can't be defined very easily, and very often it's just used as a kind of greenwashing. And I think one of the challenges for us is to make very clear the different experience you have when you travel to Kerala and visit a state where responsible tourism is growing very fast. It's about what people do. And Kerala has lots of examples of people taking really sustained approaches to changing the way tourism operates and making it work a lot better. So why the focus on responsibility? Largely, I think, because it's about what we do. It implies and requires that we take action. And it's critical to change, to make change, that we acknowledge what the problems are. And Dr. Venu, I think that's what happened in 2008 at the conference. Kerala understood that there were problems with the way tourism was operated and sought to change it. And in changing it, you managed to bring the private sector, local communities, the state and local government together to achieve those changes. What we're seeing internationally now is an increasing focus on yield and attracting market segments to destinations which will come in harmony with local life and culture. And that demand for experiential travel is the major new consumer trend that the previous speaker was talking about. Kerala is in a really great position now to continue to counter greenwashing and enabling the tourist to experience the difference. And it's those experiences which lead the tourist to go home and talk about the wonderful time they've had in Kerala and to encourage others to visit. We really need to look at establishing viral marketing, particularly by those people who are returning from trips to Kerala. I just wanted to remind us briefly about the principles of the Cape Town Declaration that Dr. Venu just referred to. Some of it's very obvious, the minimizing the negative impacts, whether they're environmental, social, or cultural, but generating greater economic benefits. And that's very much been at the heart, really, of Kerala's responsible tourism strategy by focusing on the well-being of host communities. What is more unusual is the notion of involving local people in decisions that affect their lives. And to be honest, Kerala shares with Barcelona, I think, the mantle for being leading destinations in having involved local people in the decision making, and that massively improves the quality of the experience for the tourist. It's about putting a positive contribution into conservation of the natural and cultural heritage. And then we come to another really important differentiator, I think, from sustainable tourism, and that is this emphasis on creating meaningful connections, enjoyable experiences, and developing a greater understanding of the local culture and environment amongst the guests, and also, of course, amongst the residents, if you're doing that successfully. We've heard reference to the importance in the minister's opening to enabling access for differently abled people. And what I would also want to emphasize is the notion of traveling with respect, being culturally sensitive. And you need, I think, to focus on attracting those market segments which are going to be culturally sensitive to Kerala. I wanted also to point out that we've only ever given 5 judges awards in the World Responsible Tourism Awards, which have been going since 2004. They're extraordinarily difficult to win, but 2 of them have been won in Kerala. You'll recognize both of those people, so I'll say no more. But it's interesting that the judges have recognized both somebody working for the state in the responsible tourism mission and someone working in the private sector, one of the real leaders of the development of responsible tourism, from CGH Earth Hotels. If we look back at the history of responsible tourism in Kerala, I'm not sure that everyone now will remember it. There'll be some younger people who weren't engaged in 2008, but it was a real privilege in 2008 to bring that second international conference on responsible tourism in destinations and to co-chair it with Dr. Venu in 2008. That resulted in the Kerala Declaration, and in retrospect, it was clear, we didn't have the word then, but in retrospect, it's clear that over-tourism was an issue in many of the rural communities experiencing large numbers of tourists. One of the things that most impressed me then, and frankly still does, because very few destinations do this, Kerala decided that it would have 4 experiments in 4 very different villages and try to work with the panchayat, with local producers of craft and soft furnishings and food, and with the private sector. And those 4 experiments enabled Kerala to learn very quickly a great deal about how to roll out responsible tourism. They worked with the communities to create producer groups, which enable them to deliver at sufficient scale to be able to produce local supply chains for the hotels and the resorts. The village life experiences created a wonderful product for tourists, and something which it was possible for the tour operators and the hotels and resorts to sell and earn commission on, thus turning them into a normal kind of business. But the other central principle, which we don't talk about enough, I think, is that the Kerala strategy avoided dependency. So it was about creating additional livelihood opportunities for local households. It wasn't about creating dependency on tourism. And I'm sure that that has served Kerala well during the COVID crisis. In 2015, the minister challenged us to actually demonstrate that there was a real positive impact from responsible tourism on local communities. It was clear when we began that research that the stakes were high, and if we were unable to demonstrate that there was a significant return for local communities, responsible tourism would not be as well funded as it was. Luckily, and perhaps not surprisingly, but I was nervous. We had the work, the analysis checked by independently, as it were, and we did manage to prove a very significant contribution to livelihoods really across Kumarakoram. That gave the minister, I think, the confidence to set up the Responsible Tourism Mission in 2017 with the explicit objective of making tourism a tool for the development of village and local communities, eradicating poverty and emphasizing women's empowerment. What I think is really dramatic about Kerala's engagement with responsible tourism, and it's world leading in this, is that we now can see an example of a whole state taking a similar approach to making sure that tourism delivers sustainability across the triple bottom line of economic, social, and environmental sustainability. I don't think there's any doubt that Kerala is now a world leader in tackling over-tourism and maximizing the local economic development through inclusive tourism, both for the visitors, so extending this to disabled or differently abled people, but also particularly for local communities and enabling as many people as possible to earn at least something from the tourism sector, either as individual private businesses or by working in the hotels or by supplying goods and services into the hotels and resorts. What we're seeing now is that responsible tourism is spreading across India. And I was listening to what the previous speaker was saying and thinking that one of the ways in which Kerala could be marketing itself across India is by more explicitly talking about the way in which the responsible tourism mission approach developed in Kerala is now spreading to other states, most recently and most publicly to Madhya Pradesh. But I know there are a number of other states looking towards Kerala as an example of how to make sustainable tourism benefit people, particularly in rural areas. We've yet to see this approach the one that's been developed in Kerala, applied in urban areas, but I see no reason why it couldn't be. The urban area approach is being adopted in Barcelona, and there may be things which could be learnt by more linkages between what's happening in Barcelona and what's happening in Kerala. You'll see on the left there a list of all the parts of India which have won awards in the World Responsible Tourism and the India Responsible Tourism Awards. It's a growing and very strong list now of places which are doing remarkable things in responsible tourism. It's also the case that responsible tourism is in the draft new National Tourism Strategy, and I'll be very surprised if it isn't in the final version. We had a really powerful session at WTM London this year, in which Rani George from Kerala Tourism participated. But you'll see there, it's interesting, it was almost an all-female panel. And we had somebody from the government of Maharashtra, as well as Sonia Meena from the Madhya Pradesh Tourism Board. What is very striking is the way in which responsible tourism has moved to the center, really, of tourism management at the destination level in India. And I think that will continue to grow. It's well worth looking out for that video on the WTM website. So what I'd like to say, and I'm deliberately, Dr. Venu, going a little quicker because I realize that time is at a premium this morning. Kerala is currently the world leader in responsible tourism. I have no doubt about that in terms of a destination which has made remarkable progress. It has some of the world leading businesses, but it's really at the destination that it stands out as being so different. So I wanted just to talk about what's going to happen over the next period, the next 2 years. If we look back, then in 2002, we had the first international conference on responsible tourism destinations, and Kerala ran the second one in 2008. It took 6 years to go from the first conference to the second. By 2018, we were into the 14th, as these conferences have happened around the world. What's happening now is that there's a draft platform for responsible tourism being put together, focused on solutions. And we'll be taking that through all 4 shows of WTM this year: the Arabian Travel Market, WTM Latin America, the Arabian Travel Market, and of course, November at WTM London. At the beginning of 2022, we shall formally launch that platform, and it will go from draft to being published. And in November 2022, we will have a major celebration of the achievements of responsible tourism, but we shall not be too self-congratulatory about that. We want to look at where the failures have been as well as the successes. What is interesting, of course, for Kerala is that you will be there amongst the major successes. Don't think there's any doubt about that. Kerala is different from most other destinations, and I think this is an opportunity really to draw to the attention of the international tourism industry, to the trade newspapers, and also to the consumer media that follows WTM about how significant the changes are in Kerala and how much you can have a superior experience by traveling to Kerala and engaging with local communities in an equal and respectful way, which is what people increasingly want as part of this trend towards experiential and transformative tourism, as the previous speaker was talking about. I had a quick look on the internet whilst the previous speaker was talking and found this quite interesting. It was published only just over a year ago, but the notion of Kerala at the crossroads of the world through its history is something which I think you should explore. It's one of the benefits of being a coastal community, that it is worth looking at the way in which you can use that position as positioning yourself as somewhere which is at the crossroads, and I would argue at the future of the world as well, with the commitment to sustainability across Kerala. That's really pretty much all that I wanted to say, Dr. Venu. As I say, I've speeded up to allow more time for questions. You can find there the links to the Responsible Tourism work which is available. There's an ICRT India network now, and an awful lot of material is available on the Responsible Tourism Partnership website. I wanted to close by saying that Kerala and Barcelona are arguably the two leading places for responsible tourism. And one of the reasons for that is that they both have strong local government systems with administrative and democratic strength. And I think that's a big part of why responsible tourism has been so successful, Dr. Venu, in Kerala, and it's continued under successive directors of tourism. And I think it's a remarkable achievement to see what has been achieved by consistency of policy in Kerala in its approach to responsible tourism, and it's left Kerala positioned extremely well for the future in a very much changed world. I am not one of those that thinks that there will be a return to business as usual post-COVID. I think the post-COVID world is going to be a different world, and we're going to have to learn to live with COVID. And the experience of COVID has changed people's perceptions, as we've seen in some of the presentations this morning. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Harold. Thank you very much, Harold. It's always a pleasure to have you on a panel and where you share your wisdom. You have been part and parcel, indeed, one of the leaders in the state, coming in periodically to advise us and also highlighting the little work that we have done in international platforms. Incidentally, all three of the names you took, in your presentation are listening in. I would like to recognize the presence of Rani George, the Principal Secretary Tourism, who is here, and one of those rare officers who said that I do not want to speak, I'm coming here to listen. Also to recognize the presence of Rupesh, the architect of the chief of the RT mission of the state and the architect of the entire field initiative. Rupesh is also here, as is Mr. Jose Dominic, the doyen of the tourism enterprises, the tourism industry of the state, who is also here. Hopefully, if we have the time, I will invite Jose to make a quick response to what he has heard now. But now, since again we are short on time and there is a very important presentation waiting, I shall now move on to the next speaker, who also has an old friend, another old friend. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Deepak Deva. Mr. Deepak Deva is known to the tourism industry here because he is one of our biggest suppliers. But more than that, Deepak Deva is arguably one of the foremost leaders of business in India, representing the country in many foreign markets. He heads one of the strongest engines that brings in large volumes of visitors to the country. Deepak is the managing director of the Travel Corporation of India Limited, the largest inbound travel company in India. In his present role as MD of TCI, he leads TCI, Sita, Distant Frontiers, and Go Vacations, a group of iconic travel brands that are market leaders for inbound tourism to India, from almost all the major markets in Europe, as also Japan, and also Japan. Mr. Deva's leadership experience and deep knowledge of the inbound industry and his focus on people and technology have helped TCI to grow into the most awarded travel company in the country for the last many, many years. He sits on practically every panel of the industry at the Government of India level, the Tourism and Hospitality Skill Council. He is co-chair of FICCI's Tourism Committee, member of the Governing Council of the Responsible Tourism Society of India, and a member. We are all eagerly waiting to hear what advice Deepak has for Kerala in the post-COVID world. Over to you, Deepak.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Dr. Venu, my fellow panelists, and members in the audience who have logged in today. I presume, Dr. Venu, you can hear me and you can see the slide, right? Am I right in saying that?
Both affirmative.
Okay. So this time last year, we were living in 2020 BC or before Corona and are now moving into 2021 AC after Corona. Difficult to imagine a more radical change a year could bring. I have three thoughts that I'd like to share with you on the future of tourism in the state of Kerala. First, I strongly believe that Kerala can set the new standard for tourism. That is a movement, that is move tourism that's focused on B&B to B&E. And what do I mean by B&E? It's all about bed and experience. What I mean by this is not just quality hotels, but the experience that Kerala must offer. As such, you should be encouraging all hospitality companies to add an experience with every overnight. Offer guests bed and an experience every day. So that was the first thought. The second thought is that we need to have the next IT revolution. Now you'd wonder, why are we talking of IT in a tourism conclave? Well, for me, the new IT would be inclusive tourism, and I don't mean to be cheeky. Let me explain this. We need to draw a new tourism map. Today, approximately 10 locations contribute to about 80% of the sector's business. This is highly skewed tourism map where a benefit of this industry are seen in just these 10 locations. We need a public-private consortium that should together identify 20 new locations across Kerala that will easily help grow business by an additional 50% and present opportunities for at least thousands of new job creators and seekers. These locations could be lesser known, historic or culturally important sites, or sites that are focused, in the case of Kerala, adventure and nature tourism. These sites would be within a short driving distance of a highway or a train station and should be connected by high quality roads. The government of Kerala should create an app for the locals to register and train to become local guides come drivers in smaller or lesser known destinations. Government could work with industry to provide the skill training via their CSR funds. This could be a successful model for young people who want to transition up the value chain and want to move out of low paying, who's doing this? Move out of low paying and inefficient jobs in the farm sector and help reduce migration to urban areas. So this is the second thought when it comes to the inclusive tourism part. Yes, I understand there is sustainability and there is responsible tourism, and inclusive tourism very much a part of what Harold spoke earlier. Who's drawing all these lines, I wonder? Somebody's having fun on my PPT. Okay.
Can the host please disable everybody else, please? Control room, please.
The other part is that I think there is the district commissioners. The government has a role to play here. I personally feel that there are 14 districts in Kerala. You need to create 14 new tourism destinations. Every district commissioner should identify, go out, check, see, find and create 14 new tourist destinations, and this would be very, very helpful. I now move on with COVID. COVID has been such, and I'm not going to discuss the disease, but I'm just going to talk about it in relation to our industry. COVID has been such a life-threatening experience for people across the world that it gives a whole new meaning to the idea of bucket lists. While in the past we often made lists and spoke about 1,000 places to go before I die, the last year has added a surreal seriousness to this idea. People are emerging from a year where death has seemed to be real and very close. We need to leverage this emotion. Our customers have understood life is uncertain. They need to be told that they shouldn't wait for that perfect moment to go on a holiday of a lifetime. They need to come to Kerala now. Lock in the customers who are raring to go on a holiday after being locked in for almost a year. Increase the share of pocket by extending their stay in Kerala. And let's speak a little bit about this. Kerala is a honeymoon destination. And there have been many people who have got married around the world but not left their country for their honeymoon. Kerala should capture this segment, and it's an ideal destination for honeymoons. I can talk from my own experience as I traveled to Kerala for my honeymoon in the late 90s, and guess what? I'm still married. We'll move on now and to the other idea that I thought we could work on. This will be great for the image of Kerala. You have the Biennale and it's been such a success. Why can't Fort Cochin be the jazz capital of India and become a part of the international jazz circuit? Right? I'll move on. Why isn't there a coastal train which goes from Trivandrum up to the north? Think of a tourist staying in Trivandrum for 2 weeks, hops onto a train, comes on to Cochin, spends the day and goes back in the evening. People move on to the north, stay a night in the north. We all know the north hasn't been attracting the number of tourists that Kerala would have liked to. Mobility by a good coastal tourist train with interesting things happening would be an ideal place to go to. The next thought that I had is about food and wine. I believe Kerala has the best food in the country. The Syrian Christian kitchen to the Mopla cuisine. Add to this some of the best chefs of the continent, and you can bring the best food to Kerala and make it a destination where people will travel to enjoy cuisine. Bilbao in Spain, Lyon in France, Melbourne in Australia are all great food spots and attract tourists for food and wine in addition to visiting the city. And as we can't grow wine, maybe we could import wine from all over and combine it with the amazing food. This will be a good reason for people to come and stay a week. It's a lifestyle destination. We could even have a Michelin star boat restaurant on the backwaters. Environmentally friendly, sustainable, do everything right. But why not take the food and wine story to a different level for Kerala? At the end of all this, what can the government of Kerala expect in 2025? I think if we are able to move forward on some of the ideas, then we should be looking at making tourism one of the Kerala's largest contributors to GDP. Let's look at some quick numbers. GDP contribution 10% 2019. A state like Kerala, it should be 20%. I'm sure this is the government's ambition and plans too. Employment 40% should employ in a state like Kerala. 40% should be directly or indirectly employed in tourism. Currently, it's 23%. Very small amount is spent by the government on expenditure, 1.27%. Don't make this mistake. Spend 5% of your expenditure on tourism. Go out, promote the destination, get the demand right. Don't make the mistake that's being made in most parts of India. The foreign exchange earning, I'm not talking of number of tourists because I don't believe in numbers. I would believe in the value that the tourists would bring. And we could generate 15,000 crores worth of foreign exchange from 10,000, great achievement for the state. So I say, ladies and gentlemen, Kerala is truly heaven on earth, and bright minds like Amitabh Kant, Dr. Venu and Suman Billa have brought it so far, the state so far in tourism. It's now time to shift gears and take Kerala to the next level. I hope that some of my thoughts will contribute to the road ahead. And yes, there is more to Kerala than Ayurveda. Thank you very much, Dr. Venu. I hand it back to you with a few extra minutes.
Thank you, Deepak. I think the length of your presentation is not as important as the points you're making.
Thank you.
I think a lot of us understand the importance of what you're saying. Expand the destination, expand the activities, deepen engagements that are possible in Kerala, and you will bring us more business. I think there is great synergy to be explored between big DMC companies and suppliers and the destination, the accommodation tour industry in Kerala. I think we should have more engagements and more interaction, I think, on the ground, where we can learn from you and you can understand the new areas which are possible. We have been talking about the North Kerala for a long time. I know that 20 years ago, I produced the first campaign for Malabar. Why is it not working? We need to sit down and think about it. And I think entrepreneurs, people who invested in properties need to be guided, that these are the reasons why we can't sell your property. These are the reasons why people are not purchasing these products. So I think there's a lot of areas where you can guide the tourism industry. I'm sure that I did not mention this earlier, but Mr. Balakiran, the Director of Tourism, is also here listening in. And I think this big takeaway from your presentation is that there are a lot of possibilities. We must be aggressive and ambitious, and hopefully people like you will continue to guide us. So thank you for giving me those extra minutes. I'm still short of time. I'm actually 15 minutes behind my schedule given to me. But it's time for discussion. And I'd like to start by inviting Jose Dominic to respond to the presentations that's been held. I would like to also say that I want 3 or 4 presenters to come, on video and be seen and heard. But kindly make your interventions short because we have other people coming behind you. Mr. Jose Dominic, control room, can you please enable the video of Mr. Jose Dominic, please? Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Venu.
They can see and hear you, Jose.
All right. So anyway, I mean, the most fascinating discussion that we've had, I've heard, and just to touch upon a few points, we've seen that. I mean, I'm quite taken up by Dr. Harold saying that Kerala is the responsible tourism leader of the world. And that's a very, very difficult stand to maintain, but I'm glad that we are recognized so. I heard from Dr. Venu's talk about Kerala's compelling story, the spice route. And of course, Dr. Chowdhury, commodity, the product, to experience, to transformation. And my own thought about post-COVID, and that I take it from Dr. Harold, post-COVID is a dream. I think we have to now, from pre-COVID or before COVID and during COVID, it looks like we'll have that COVID will live with us for a long time to come. So in that context is where the road ahead, Kerala will have to learn. Of course, following all the protocols, but beyond that, what is the transformation or the compelling story Kerala can give? Much is said about that, but what comes to my mind is authentic, real, and inclusive and immersive. I mean, these are all topics. I'm just touching on those topics. But I'm now from being. I was once a time. I planned to be a accountant, became hotelier. Now I'm becoming more of a farmer, and I've learned something that Kerala is bounteously about with. So I think that in the post-COVID world, I'm just suggesting a point that the homestead farm can be for Kerala a discovery, which it always had. It had Ayurveda. It had got the boat races. It had the backwaters. It had and so on and so forth. These were stars in the Kerala story before COVID. Now I believe that the homestead farm, which will bring the city dweller, which will bring the experience of Kerala in a very intimate way and in a very real way. The farmer is not performing to the tourist. He's doing what he's always done to grow. And the traveler will come and can come in a very safe environment, naturally, to engage with and to see and from that take some benefit, take some maybe I would call it, it'll be too ambitious to call it transformation, but take something very different. And the advantage of this is that the homestead farm is probably the most widespread, the most dispersed, and the largest asset, I would think, which is underutilized. And I've realized it now as I've spent more time at the farm, the most underutilized asset. And it's so much so powerful, and it's so much akin to what we want to seek, what a traveler will seek from traveling, what a destination would like to provide. It has, from a point of view of carbon footprint, it's probably going to have achieved extraordinary. It's always there. It's there. You don't need to build or create. It engages and utilizes the skill and the abilities of rural people. So it is not as though that you need to send them to farm school or hotel school or tourism schools. They're doing what they've always been done. They're good at. And in fact, at the moment, I've learned tremendously by growing what is called maraschino or tapioca, and the difficulty of a farmer that has, and the joy of the farmer. And in fact, I had a friend or a traveler who was there, and he said that his highlight moment was is to harvest a farm, the tapioca, to boil it, to parboil it, to dry it, and all that process. It's all available, and I think in so many ways, there's not, as Deepak there was talking about districts. There are lakhs and lakhs of homestead farms in Kerala, all of which is a tremendous resource, easily available. It just needs to be provided in a very authentic way, which I'm sure that the Kerala model. I know I'm going. I'll just end with one statement. The Kerala story began when small local entrepreneurs did what they could, which is small, in a manner which they knew, which is local, yet making small and local world class was the Kerala story. I'm sure if this is what resulted in the Kerala tourism metamorphosis, and I'm sure we can continue to do that while living with COVID, and hopefully in a future time, which we all hope for, when there will be no more COVID. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jose. I have pleasure in inviting the next, the next response. Mr. George Correa, would you like to make a quick intervention as requested? Can you please unmute and make visible Mr. George Correa, please?
Thank you, sir. So my point is, without immediate survival, there is no revival, whether it is post-COVID or pre-COVID or whatever it is. And I'm so thankful to my previous speakers. They all touched the point on the human element in tourism, and this is what I would like to call as the people factor in the sustainability. Unfortunately, in Kerala, what happened, or I should say, pan India, what happened? The human element, the people factor, was totally discarded by all the governments. And now, without containing this crisis, how far we can go ahead? Because we know that the Indian hospitality was known for our kind of good professionals, with expertise and good hospitality and good courteousness and all. But unfortunately, majority of those people have left the industry, and both our state and central governments, they do not have even a data how many jobs have been lost, how many people have been leaving tourism. And also, I should say, when we are talking about people factor, even the stakeholders are a part of the people factor in hospitality, in tourism. But I'm thankful to Honorable Minister for declaring a financial assistance scheme in the month of October. But unfortunately, I would like to reiterate that even at least 5% of the applicants have not been sanctioned the loan. This is not the way we should go ahead. Without considering the people factor, we will not be able to look ahead of tourism or whatever it is. Unfortunately, on 5th of February, the tourism fraternity is forced to bring to a protest level pan-India to raise our concerns. So this is because even the governments are not listening to tourism. When we are talking about 10% GDP or 20% GDP, whatever it is, without the human element support, we will not be able to look ahead or we will not be able to revive. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. George Caria. I think it's an important point which I made at the beginning. We are in the midst of a crisis. While we talk about the future of tourism in Kerala, we have to be mindful of the fact that thousands of people are struggling to make ends meet. And I'm sure that the government will take cognizance of the fact that the package needs to be improved. I'm sure that something will be done at the government level on this. May I now call upon Mr. E.M. Najib to make his response? Najib, please. Can you please unmute Najib? Mr. Najib? Mr. E.M. Najib, please.
Requesting E.M. Najib to unmute.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Venu, because I was unable to unmute. That is why I could speak earlier. Thank you for calling me. I think we had an excellent session organized by Planning Board under the leadership of Dr. Venu. I really appreciate and congratulate you for this, initiative. And we are very glad that, to hear, starting from Mr. Suman Billa, was a close friend and good supporter for Kerala tourism for longer years. Also, outstanding speakers like Harold, Christina, my good friend Deepak, and Chaudhary, everybody. Very good, outside view has been projected here about Kerala. I'm quite glad about it because we always talk about Kerala. We always talk about the prospect, the experiences, the perspective, the future, everything. Because that is always based on our own viewpoints, our own experiences, as well as our own interactions with others. But people who have presented today, they are well experienced, well connected with Kerala, but at the same time, they had a totally different perspective for Kerala. I was actually, everyone was excellent in their own way, but my friend Mr. Deepak Deva was talking about 14 districts should be the new tourism destinations. I would like to, add, it is not 14 new destinations. Probably we can add actually another 50 new destinations. And the opportunities of employment, the foreign exchange earning, the GDP growth and all, we have been talking about the potential for years. But the only thing is, the bureaucracy as well as the political leadership should really realize the potential of tourism in Kerala in different perspectives. There are very many areas where we have not even touched upon. Look at medical value travel. The best hospitals in the country are in Kerala. 40 hospitals of NABH accredited hospitals, but we are nowhere in medical value travel. Such a lot of people can come. Probably 30% of the generation today in Ayurveda can be another 40% in medical value travel. So like that, several new products. Look at the film shooting destination. We have started, but we never, we had never gone ahead with that. But today, the states like Odisha, all the other, many other smaller states who doesn't have that kind of attractions in Kerala are excelling in film shooting tourism. Honeymoon tourism. So there are several products which we can actually, attract much more tourists to Kerala and do very well in the coming years. Of course, we are going to be in a newer world after COVID-19, as very well explained by everyone, especially Deepak. But what is important is that, like my friend Mr. Joskaria very emotionally said, that we have to survive, to revive, and move forward. So today, unfortunately, we are in a dilemma, like Dr. Venu also knows, planning board. Everybody has been taking a lot of interest, but practically, a lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people are in real trouble. This is not only in Kerala, but all over India. Unfortunately, the governments have not taken tourism seriously, even though everybody talks about the importance of tourism, including Prime Minister and Tourism Minister and everyone. But when it comes to health, they always think that tourism is a class of elite, and so why should we support? They can always
Point well made, Najib. I think
that's all. But anyway, we are the industry is together, along with the political leadership as well as the bureaucracy, and we are really working together to move forward. And we are very confident that we will do very well, and we will work together to do that, to achieve our focus and targets. These valuable suggestions will add, additionally for us to make our plans better and better. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Najib. Thank you very much, Najib. Since we don't have too much of time, and I have already the last responder today, Pradeep Murthy, please. Pradeep, you have requested for time, so can you make your intervention very quick? Please unmute Pradeep Murthy, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Dr. Venu, and thanks for giving me an opportunity to say something. First of all,
your car. Nice view of your car.
I'm very, very sorry. I'm traveling at the moment, and I wasn't planning to speak, but I thought maybe I can put in a point if that's all right. So wonderful thoughts today from the panel of luminaries that the state has managed to pull together, and fantastic stuff. It was very encouraging to get that data from Christina, especially around adventure travel. And I think I loved Mr. Deepak Deva's suggestion that every accommodation, every night of stay should offer an experience bundled along with it. My only question was that while this kind of thinking and thoughts is very laudable, at such senior levels, the question is, how do we translate that into the foot soldiers of the industry? The people who talk to the customers, the sales guys who are hitting the pavement, the front office managers who are talking to guests who are staying there. Unfortunately, to a large extent, having tried and done this for a little while, my experience has that those foot soldiers are still thinking very, very conservatively in terms of room amenities, swimming pools and restaurants and things like that. How do we get them to start thinking about experiences and all the things that Professor Chowdhury also spoke about, getting it to transformative experiences, and really make this into action? Is it about kids doing some different kind of training? Is it about getting marketing campaigns to start our foot soldiers thinking differently? Just something I wanted to point out, because the thoughts are great, but how do we translate that into reality? Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks, Pradeep. I think you have actually given me the right entry point, because my first question was to Deepak. And now that Pradeep has put another element to that question, Dr. Rajashree Ajit, Director KITS, has raised this point for you. With the job options and employment in tourism and hospitality being severely affected, what would be the major steps taken to keep interest alive and draw and retain youngsters to the area of tourism education? Deepak, Mr. Deepak Deva, please.
Sorry, Dr. Venu, your voice wasn't very clear, but if you're asking, what I got is that how would you encourage people to join the travel industry now when there is so much of unemployment and people being asked to leave? Is that the question?
I'll quickly say, Pradeep had asked you about, these kinds of new skills to the people who are in the industry. And
Yeah.
Rajashri Ajit has raised the question, as now with the job options and employment being severely affected, what are the steps that need to be taken in order to attract and retain talent in the tourism sector?
So, Dr. Venu, we have to be very honest with each other. This is not an industry over the next 24 months that is going to be the first preference for people to join and start working. Secondly, I think there isn't going to be so many posts available because demand is going to be slashed by 60 to 70% this year, maybe 50% next year, and like Suman said, in 23 we'll come back to normal. So there isn't going to be really positions that are there. The question is, employers have to show a sense of responsibility in ensuring that they keep their people engaged mentally and financially. Now, I understand many companies, you cannot just pay full salaries, you can't pay half salaries, but you need to have people engaged some way or the other with the organization and some sort of financial support. If that is not there, and unfortunately people will have to leave the organization, those people are not going to come back in a hurry. Unfortunately, the social side of this is that their skill sets are not good enough for them to come back into to go to any other industry. So we have a major problem coming up in the next 12 to 24 months, and this is where government intervention is important. And I'm sorry to say, but at a national level, we have not thought of this problem, and we are not thinking of it in the tourism and hospitality piece at least. We have just been left for the industry to handle. So to answer your question, very difficult for people to get jobs in this industry for the next 12 to 24 months. Employers are going to be very careful. Listen, we have recasted every job. Everybody is going to do 1.5 jobs in the future. Organizations have been right sized, if you want to call it that, and that is how it's going to go. So yes, it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be very tough for the next 24 months.
Plain speaking, Deepak, but much needed. I think the industry, we all need to understand that jobs will continue to be shaved off, that influx and recruitment will not happen overnight. So we are in for a tough time, and Rajashri may like to take that, important point that Deepak is making. There is a question for Mr. Billa. Suman, this is a question which is a little dicey. How do you react to or internationally? Can you advise us whether subnational governments, which is, did anyone hear what I said? Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? I'm told that my voice is not clear.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. So, Suman, the question was that differing priorities for national governments, national tourism boards, and subnational boards like Kerala, for instance, or in other contexts. How do you think that these governments, need to market themselves? Do you think that they have to market themselves separate from the overall national branding, or do you think that the overall overarching brand will take over? The reason why this has been asked is because, as mentioned, hygiene and safety, when it becomes core issues, naturally, a large country like India with huge numbers and all that may be intimidating to visitors. However, a state like Kerala may be able to offer itself to an international market, post-vaccination phase better. Do you think that there is a possibility, or do you think that the national branding will be the overwhelming one?
No, I think it's always good to have the national brand to tag along, but I think the dynamic is changing considerably. One of the things that I had said was that when you attack markets to get people from there, it's going to be hyper local, hyper targeted, hyper aggressive. But the same will also hold from the supply side. It's no longer going to be one large thing going out and saying, because you're going to be targeting very specific people. You will need to also offer very specific products. It's not going to be something like India offers everything, why don't you come? We will need to drill it down and say, for your health and wellness, Ayurveda or something. So I think you will have that working out both ways. It's always good to have the national brand, but I think the product offering is always better to be well defined, especially now.
Thank you, Suman. Another question to you, which has been raised by Jose Dominic, is very direct. Examples of destinations that Kerala can learn from. So we already heard Harold talk about Barcelona, next door to Madrid. But do you think there are other destinations that we can take as role?
I think there are a lot of destinations we can learn from, but if you're looking at it from a COVID perspective, I'm afraid there are not many, because I think all of those who took the risk and moved ahead in the late summer last year are actually licking their wounds, because it did not go as well as it was. And I think denting of customers' confidence is one issue that is holding on. I think, to my mind, the biggest opportunity for us is to look at kickstarting domestic demand, and for that, I think we need to have homogeneated health protocols between the various states of the country. And typically, I think in terms of what governments have done, are essentially two things. The first is they have tried to put money in the pockets of people who have lost their jobs. So we've had extraordinarily good furloughing schemes in Europe which have been done. But unfortunately, the governments who have done that are also at their wits' end now, because there is a huge outflow, and as the pandemic lasts longer, it's putting a tremendous amount of pressure on them. In Spain, they're actually reducing the amount of money that goes out. So that is one. And I don't think in India we have so many more competing things like unorganized labor, etc. For it to actually flow out to tourism is going to take some time. The other important thing that people have done is availability of credit, and governments giving some sort of guarantee for the credit that has been done. I think to some extent within the framework of MSME, the government has done that in India too. But I think today, and unfortunately, if I speak honestly, most of the governments have now taken a very laid back wait and watch position, because they think when we see that there is revival, then they will come out and play. And I think that is when we should also expect the governments to come and put big money out there to promote their destinations and see as to how they need to bring in the tourists. Because right now people think it's not too much doesn't make too much sense to go out and commit money there.
Yeah, thank you. This can go on, I know, but unfortunately, I have a deadline. The tech guys have given me deadlines so I don't ask for a 10-minute extension, because there were tech glitches, but I'm running out of that extension time as well. But I think before we close, all of us, I think the overall sentiment that's been expressed is that we need to look beyond the crisis that is on us. And I think beyond that, there is a crisis. We have to accept that. Deepak, George, there are a lot of people have actually brought out the stark reality of that. But beyond that, I think this is the time to reflect and build and think about better and more innovative way to market our destination. I think there is a lot of positives to take away from here. We are on a strong wicket, because look at the customer preferences. Look at how people are viewing themselves as visitors. Seeking what kind of experiences. I think there are a lot of things going for Kerala. So is everybody else. It's not tourism alone. Hundreds, thousands of people have lost their livelihoods. They're all fighting to survive. This government, and I'm not talking politics here, this government mounted one of the biggest relief packages that a state has ever mounted, only because we knew that putting food on the table, one of the most basic things, needs to be addressed first. Admittedly, perhaps the package which has been declared may not have had the desired effect, but the intention of the government is there, that we have to work with the industry. So I think with these positive sentiments, I must now reluctantly draw this session to a close. We've had extremely thought-provoking, stimulating, presentations from all the eminent speakers. I think we've all been enriched by what we heard in the last two hours. I know that each one of you can command an audience for the next 2 hours or so, but unfortunately, I have to now ring the bell. My thanks to Mr. Suman Billa from UNWTO for having graced this conference and made this presentation. Thanks to Deepak Deva, old friend and very strong opinions who've done a lot of plain speaking here. Thank you very much to Harold, Dr. Goodwin, friend of Kerala and the doyen of responsible tourism. Thank you very much to Professor Chaudhary, who also has made an extremely thought-provoking statement here about transformational travel, and also in absentia to Ms. Christina Beckman, who came out with statistics that underline the importance of experiential travel. My thanks to all those people who have joined in, made their interventions, and also listened in. Thank you to the tourism department officials, starting from Ronnie George, Balakiran, Rupesh, all the others who are gathered here. To the industry also, I hope to see you very soon. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.